Hello everyone. Thanks for being here tonight, and welcome to Sleepcrime. If it's late where you are, I hope things around you are quiet right now. I know many of you like to listen to these stories as you're winding down, maybe as you're getting ready to sleep. The stories you're about to hear come from different places, different lives, but they carry a similar weight. They begin in ordinary moments, and slowly drift into something darker, often without warning. Before you drift off, feel free to leave a comment, and let me know where in the world you're listening from. And if you find yourself settling into the story, you can like or subscribe if you want. There's no rush tonight. Just take your time and listen. Story 1. Dong Wenhui grew up far from any skyline. A small village in Shaanxi province, fields close enough to hear at night, the kind of place where families know each other by voice before face. Her parents didn't have much, but the house was steady. No shouting, no chaos. 3 children, an older sister, a younger brother, and Wenhui in the middle, quietly watching everything. She wasn't loud as a child. People remembered that. What they noticed instead was how early she learned to hold herself together. When the national college entrance exam came, she was the only one in the family who passed. In the village, that mattered. It wasn't just success. It was proof that someone could leave and not come back empty-handed. People still mention that exam when they talk about her. Like it marked the moment everything shifted. Education wasn't a dream for Wenhui. It was a tool, a way out. She believed in it with a kind of calm stubbornness, the kind that doesn't argue or announce itself. She carried pressure the way some people carry groceries, quietly, without asking for help, even when it's too much. Medical school took her far from home and gave her very little back in comfort. No connections, no safety net, just long days, strict rules, and the sense that one mistake could undo everything. She adjusted, slowly, step by step. She learned to survive inside systems that weren't built for people like her. After graduation, she went through layers of screening and rejection before one offer finally stayed. A major hospital in Xi'an. A permanent nursing position. Stable. Respected. Rare. Especially for someone from a rural background with no one pulling strings behind the scenes. What people saw was success. What they didn't see was how narrow her life became to hold it together. She lived the way she always had, careful, restrained, planned. Every expense weighed. Every decision checked twice. Money went home each month, without fail. Her parents relied on it. Her siblings leaned on it. Over time, she became the center of gravity for the entire family. If something went wrong, Wenhui handled it. It's strange how quickly families adjust when one person becomes dependable. She saved relentlessly, not out of fear, but purpose. While co-workers rented and waited, she bought a small apartment in Xi'an with her own earnings. No celebration, no announcement, just another box quietly checked. To her relatives, she became the example, the daughter who didn't drift, who didn't need watching. There was no romance to speak of, no scandal. Her life, from the outside, looked almost too clean. Career rising, home secured, everything in order. And yet, the traits that carried her forward, patience, endurance, silence, were also the ones that left her exposed. Wenhui had learned early that enduring was safer than resisting. That swallowing pain kept things stable. When harm appeared, her instinct wasn't to confront it or ask for help. It was to absorb it and keep moving. That instinct would matter later. Because when she crossed paths with Shi Jiahao, nothing stopped it. Shi Jiahao came from nearby, in the Xianying area. Younger than Wenhui by a year, but already worn down in a different way. He didn't finish middle school. He drifted instead, job to job, mostly driving trucks when someone needed hands. Some days he ate well. Some days he didn't. Responsibility never stayed long with him. He married early, had 2 children, and then walked away from the weight of it all. Debt piled up. Work fell apart. The marriage collapsed. What was left was disorder, financial, personal, emotional. Where Wenhui built quietly upward, Jiahao moved sideways, then downward, clinging to whatever might hold. People like that don't always look dangerous at first. Sometimes they just look lost. He couldn't support himself for long. He needed someone stable, someone patient, someone who wouldn't push back too hard. And in 2019, an introduction gave him exactly that opening. Wenhui's cousin wanted to help. Marriage had been on her mind for a while, and the plan was simple. Introduce Wenhui to one of Jiahao's friends. Jiahao was only there to connect the dots. He didn't stay in that role. From the moment he saw Wenhui, he noticed what others had praised for years. Calm, gentle, unassuming. But what he saw wasn't character. It was opportunity. He didn't register her as a full person with boundaries and weight. He saw stability, a respected hospital position, a clean past, a steady income, and beneath her quiet exterior, someone who had been trained by life to endure rather than resist. To Jiahao, that wasn't coincidence. It was invitation, and without hesitation he took control of the introduction, redirecting it, reshaping it, setting himself at the center of her path. That was where the balance tipped. He didn't stay on the edge for long. At some point, Jiahao stopped acting like the connector and stepped forward, placing himself squarely in the center, as if that had always been the plan. What followed wasn't impulsive. It was measured. He studied her, listened closely, adjusted. He learned how she spoke, what she hesitated over, what made her uncomfortable. And very quickly, one thing became clear to him. Wenhui had almost no experience with romantic relationships. No past complications. No learned suspicion. That absence wasn't neutral. To someone like him, it was useful. So he moved in slowly, wrapping himself in patience. Thoughtfulness. The kind of attention that feels rare when you're not used to it. He never mentioned the marriage, or the children, or the debt that followed him everywhere. Those facts stayed buried, while he offered a different version of himself. Limited means maybe, but gentle. Someone who listened. Someone who put her first. At the beginning, it probably didn't feel rushed. Just steady. To Wenhui, there was no obvious reason to doubt him. She had no defenses built for this. No template for deception dressed as care. And without realizing it, she followed him further in, step by step, unaware that what felt like closeness was actually enclosure. But stories held together by lies don't age well. Small things began to slip. A detail that didn't line up. A reaction that came too late. Whether it was intuition or repetition, the truth assembled itself quietly. Jiahao had been married. He had children. For Wenhui, that discovery didn't land softly. It tore straight through everything she believed about him. She valued boundaries, clarity, right and wrong. This wasn't a gray area to her. It was a rupture, and by any reasonable measure, this should have ended there. It didn't. What came next was not remorse, it was urgency. Panic disguised as devotion. Jiahao rushed back to his family home, searching through drawers and cabinets, pulling out documents. Household records. Marriage papers. He pushed for a divorce with frantic speed. The children were left behind. No custody. No hesitation. This wasn't sacrifice. It was calculation. When it was done, he went to Wenhui with proof in hand. And then he knelt, crying, shaking, repeating that he had given up everything. That love had cost him his entire life. That all of it was for her. That kind of scene stays with you, even if you don't fully believe it. For someone as compassionate as Wenhui, it was overwhelming. The logic she'd been holding onto loosened its grip. What stood in front of her no longer looked like a deceiver. It looked like someone broken, desperate to start over. What she didn't see was that this wasn't a turning point. It was a door closing. When Jiahao moved into the apartment she had worked years to afford, the tone shifted completely. The careful boyfriend vanished. In his place was someone smaller, harsher, and far more controlling. He had no stable work. Debt followed him. And so, without discussion, her income became his domain. Paychecks. Expenses. Decisions. Everything passed through him. Later, when records were reviewed, the scope of it became clear. Nearly $80,000 she had earned over a few short years was gone, drained away. Meanwhile, Wenhui lived on less than $300 a month. She had once enjoyed small comforts. Clothes she liked. Meals she didn't have to rush through. Over time, even those disappeared. A shirt priced at $11 felt like too much unless it was marked down. Restaurants became unthinkable. Pleasure became something postponed indefinitely. From the outside, no one would have guessed how tight things were. She worked constantly, saved what she could, gave without keeping count. And behind her, someone clung on, consuming everything she produced. She never told her family. Not once. She didn't want them to worry. Didn't want to expose him. Silence felt like protection. Instead, it became permission. Because as long as no one knew, Jiahao learned something dangerous. That there were no consequences. That he could take control and press harder. And that belief settled in, growing more certain with every day she endured without speaking. If losing her money hollowed out Wenhui's life, then what came next hollowed out her. Slowly. Repeatedly. With no clear edge where it began or ended. Jiahao's control didn't announce itself all at once. It tightened quietly, fed by his own sense of worthlessness standing next to her. He checked her phone whenever he wanted. No reason given. No explanation required. A single reaction from a mail account online could set him off. A routine exchange with a co-worker at the hospital was enough. Even an ordinary afternoon out with a close friend, if she didn't report it quickly enough, could trigger punishment waiting at home. At first, it was slaps. Then it wasn't. The line moved. Again. And again. Grabbing her throat. Beatings that used whatever was nearby. Each episode pushed the boundary farther back, until violence stopped feeling like an incident and started feeling like part of the rhythm of life. When something happens often enough, it stops feeling shocking. It just feels expected. Outside that apartment, Wenhui played her role perfectly. The reliable daughter. The stable sister. The one who kept everyone calm. Her parents never heard a word of what was happening. Not once. She absorbed it all in silence. Only in her diary did the truth surface. Pages filled with exhaustion and fear. She wrote about feeling as though she was dying and waking up again, over and over. About moments when she felt herself disappear. About threats. About fear so sharp it froze her in place. After every attack, the pattern repeated. Jiahao would cry. Sometimes he tied himself up. Sometimes he knelt. He begged. He swore it would never happen again. Then after a short stretch of quiet, it did. Violence. Apologies. Promises. And then violence again. The loop never broke. It just tightened, wearing down what little resistance she had left. What finally erased her remaining escape routes wasn't the beatings alone. It was isolation. Friends were pushed out. Contact thinned. Calls went unanswered. One by one, connections disappeared until her world collapsed inward, leaving only two people inside it, herself and the man hurting her. To make sure she stayed, Jiahao crossed into something colder. He waited for moments when she wasn't fully alert. He took photos, recorded videos. Then he held them up as leverage. If she talked about leaving, he said he would send them to her workplace. Post them publicly. Destroy her reputation completely. For Wenhui, that threat landed deep. Her job mattered. Her name mattered. Where she came from, dignity wasn't abstract. It was survival. That kind of threat doesn't need repeating. Once is enough. He didn't stop there. He knew everything about her family. Where they lived. Who they were. And he said it plainly. If she ran, if she left, he would kill them. Every thought of escape ended there. And yet, even in that darkness, there was one brief crack where light almost got in. In the early hours of March 26, 2024, Wenhui called home. It was late. Her voice was shaken. She asked for help. When her father saw her later, he saw the marks on her neck. He heard her say that the night before, Jiahao had nearly strangled her. Whatever hesitation, he had vanished instantly. Her parents and younger brother rushed to the apartment. Police were called. For a moment, it looked like the spiral might finally stop. It didn't. When authorities arrived, the situation was treated as a dispute. Mediation, not danger. Jiahao stood there, dismissive, watching Wenhui closely. The threat didn't need words. The case was labeled a domestic conflict. The next day, terrified of what he might do to her family, Wenhui went alone to the police station and withdrew the report. Quietly, without protest. And she went back. Sometimes asking for help and not getting it hurts more than staying silent. That moment stayed with her. Heavy. Final. It told her something she couldn't unlearn. That even when she reached out, even when she followed the rules, protection didn't come. After that, one thought settled in her mind. Cold. Persistent. And alone. By then, there was nowhere left that felt safe to her. Not the apartment. Not the city. Not even the idea of escape. The final collision came 2 months later, on May 6th. It was also the last time her parents tried to pull their daughter back from the edge. They went to the apartment without warning. No phone call. No preparation. Just urgency. They hoped, one more time, that if they arrived in person, something would change. What they walked into broke them. Jiahao was still there, sitting comfortably, acting as though the place belonged to him. And beside him, their daughter looked smaller than they remembered. She barely spoke. Barely ate. Her body leaned inward, as if trying to disappear. Parents noticed those details right away, even before words. Her father couldn't hold it in anymore. Months of fear and restraint collapsed all at once. He overturned the coffee table, his voice cracking as he shouted that she was being beaten and still staying. the room filled with noise, confusion, desperation. That was when Jiahao stopped pretending. In front of her parents, he showed no remorse. No apology. When they demanded that he leave, he didn't argue. He threatened, "Either you die, or I die." The room went cold. Wenhui's father stood his ground, swearing that as long as he lived, he would never agree to this relationship. Jiahao didn't hesitate. He told him to go ahead and die. Said it would make things easier. That exchange changed everything. In that moment, Jiahao understood something clearly. As long as Wenhui's parents were alive and present, he could never fully control her. They were the last barrier between him and absolute dominance. And Wenhui understood something too. The man standing there wasn't just draining her. He was dangerous, unstable, capable of anything. If she stayed, it wouldn't only destroy her. It would pull her family down with her. After that day, she appeared compliant. Quiet, enduring. But inside, something shifted. She began preparing to leave for good. Carefully, secretly. It wasn't bravery. It was necessity. And it was the last hope she had to protect everyone she loved. On the morning of the 20th, she moved through her routines with unusual calm. She weighed herself, transferred money into savings, washed 4 pairs of shoes, prepared food for the next day. Ordinary actions done with care. She didn't know that beneath her building, in the underground parking garage, he was already waiting. Jiahao borrowed a car from a friend. He transferred into it a long double-edged knife he normally kept in his truck, along with a cotton blanket he had prepared earlier. Then he sat there, in the dark, for 8 hours. Concrete walls, damp air, no movement. No one knows what he thought about during that time. Shortly after 7 in the evening, Wenhui returned from work. She never made it upstairs. She was stopped in the garage, surprised, cornered, panicked, whether out of fear, or because she didn't want attention, or because her life felt immediately at risk. She got into the car. The vehicle moved. He drove east, away from the center of the city. Streetlights thinned. Familiar landmarks vanished. Eventually, he stopped at a deserted intersection in Baseo district. No crowds, no witnesses, only darkness and silence. Inside the closed space of the car, everything that had been held back finally broke loose. This time, Wenhui didn't stay silent. She said the word she had been holding onto for a month. Break up. It takes a lot to say something like that when you know it might not be safe. That was the moment she tried to reclaim her life. What followed was violent and chaotic. She fought back instinctively. Later examinations showed that she had grabbed the blade with her bare hands, leaving deep wounds across her palms. Blood everywhere. Desperation without strategy. It wasn't enough. The injury to her neck ended her life. Afterward, Jiahao didn't drive to a hospital. He didn't call for emergency help. He took out the cotton blanket and covered her body as its warmth faded. Then he started the car and drove. For more than an hour, he wandered through the streets of Xi'an. During that time, he made no attempt to save her. He called family members, called friends, spoke in fragmented sentences that didn't fully make sense. What matters is what he didn't do. He didn't try to help her. Only after he was certain that the woman beside him was no longer breathing did something else begin to form. Not grief, not panic, a story. In his mind, he started assembling it piece by piece. A loss of control, a sudden emotional break, a lover's agreement that went wrong. The details shifted until they felt smooth enough to tell. When the version finally settled, he turned the car around and drove himself to the police station. Later that night, Wenhui's parents received the call. When her father heard that his daughter had been killed, there was no moment of disbelief. No questions, just a heavy, final collapse inside. Because for them, the danger they had lived under for so long hadn't surprised them in the end. It had simply arrived. Sometimes the worst news doesn't feel sudden. It feels overdue. Nearly a year and a half later, on November 3, 2025, the case was brought to public trial at the Xi'an Intermediate People's Court. Jiahao sat in the defendant's seat with his head shaved. His expression stayed flat. No visible remorse. No hesitation. Charged with intentional homicide, he began doing what he had always done: deny, distort, retreat. He changed his statements in court. Said the long blade wasn't a weapon, just something he used to scrape skin from his hands. Said the blanket was there because the car felt cold. Claimed the killing happened during an argument, that it was a momentary loss of control, something that should be treated as passion rather than planning. He went further. He told the court that he loved her. that he wanted to die with her, that the reason he survived was simply because he couldn't bring himself to finish the act. Those words landed hard. The prosecution responded immediately. Calm questions. Precise. Who carries a regulated blade for personal grooming? Who prepares a blanket in the heat of early summer? And who, after killing someone in a sudden argument, drives aimlessly for more than an hour without calling for help? When those details were placed together, the picture stopped shifting. This wasn't an impulse. It was prepared. At some point, explanations stop sounding confusing and start sounding deliberate. What followed outside the courtroom only deepened public anger. Jiahao's family never offered an apology. Instead, they mocked the victim's family online. They targeted Wenhui's younger brother directly, writing that the man in detention still had food, water, sunlight, people to look after him, unlike Wenhui, who would lie forever in darkness. For the Dong family, those words erased any remaining restraint. At trial, Wenhui's parents refused all financial compensation. Every dollar. They asked for nothing in return except the maximum sentence allowed by law. Her father's cries outside the courtroom weren't pleas for mercy. They were the last defense of his daughter's dignity. As proceedings continued, another piece of evidence entered the room. The diary Wenhui had hidden deep in her bookshelf while she was still alive. Page after page was read aloud. Fear, exhaustion, pain. The entries traced her decline with painful clarity. A woman who once enjoyed reading, who planned her meals, who cared for small routines, slowly erased by control and violence. Those pages didn't argue. They didn't exaggerate. They simply existed. Writing like that isn't meant for anyone else. That's how you know it's honest. The case that came to be known nationwide as the murder of the Shaanxi nurse is still awaiting final sentencing. The court has not yet delivered its final ruling. But under long-standing judicial practice, with no extraordinary circumstances introduced, the outcome is no mystery. Justice has not spoken its final word yet, but its direction is already clear. This wasn't a crime that grew out of love gone wrong. It wasn't a sudden loss of control wrapped in romance. What happened to Wenhui was something else entirely. A long failure. Not just by one man, but by the space around her. By silence. By hesitation. By systems that noticed, paused, and then stepped back. Each moment where help didn't arrive mattered. Each time her fear was treated as something negotiable. Each time a warning sounded, but wasn't acted on. None of it alone caused her death. Together, it closed every exit. When people say it's complicated, sometimes they really mean they don't know how to step in. On December 15th, 2025, Wenhui's father finally did something the family had avoided for months. He unlocked her phone. It felt wrong to touch it before. Too close. Too final. But by then, there was nothing left to protect by not looking. Inside were 25 photographs. They weren't hidden in any special folder. Just there. Quiet. Each one showing a different mark. Her face. Her chest. Her arms. Her hands. Her back. Her legs. There was no pattern to the injuries, only repetition. Proof that harm had become routine. The nurse who once put on a white coat and went to work saving others had been living inside damage for so long that normal life had slowly disappeared. You don't take pictures like that unless you're trying to hold on to something real. The family looked through them together. They cried until breathing became difficult. And then, when there was nothing left to say, they did one last thing for their daughter. They organized the images, carefully, quietly, and handed them to the prosecutors. It was late, too late to save her. But not too late to make sure the truth stayed visible. Not too late to insist that her suffering be seen as what it was, and that her death would not dissolve into another story explained away. It didn't change the ending, but it refused to let it be ignored. Story 2. The story settles in Flushing in Queens. A place that feels familiar even if you've just arrived. Main Street runs through it like a spine, crowded with grocery stores, restaurants, nail salons, signs written in characters that feel like home. For many newcomers from China, this neighborhood offers something close to safety. You can live, work, eat, and speak without ever feeling completely foreign. That sense of closeness matters here, because it's also where things quietly came apart. Zhou Xiaomei was 29 when everything reached its breaking point. She lived in Queens, but most mornings she crossed state lines, traveling into Connecticut to work as a nail technician. Long days. Repetitive work. Enough money to keep going, not enough to feel secure. She came from Fuzhou, in Fujian province. Her family life was ordinary, which meant working early and leaving school early. There wasn't much choice. Through acquaintances, she met a man who would later become her husband. It moved fast. Marriage paperwork was filed in China. No long courtship. No time to second-guess. What made the situation fragile from the start was his family. His parents had already left China years earlier and settled in the United States. Their son stayed behind. After the wedding, he followed them. Xiaomei did not. She was pregnant then, and alone. She stayed back in China, believing this was temporary. That once her husband found his footing, once work and papers were sorted out, she would be brought over too. That hope didn't last very long. Not long after he arrived in the United States, pressure began coming from his parents. They wanted him to leave the marriage. The reasons were never made clear. What mattered was the result. From far away, Xiaomei felt it immediately. Sometimes you can feel a decision being made without anyone saying it out loud. The distance stretched on. Conversations with her in-laws turned sharp. Humiliating. She was pregnant, separated from her husband, unsure if she still had a future as part of the family at all. Over time, the strain changed her. Her mental health suffered in ways that people around her could see. Only after her daughter was born did her in-laws agree to bring her to the United States. Mother and child arrived together. On the surface, it looked like a reunion. It wasn't. Living under the same roof made things worse, not better. Arguments flared constantly. The atmosphere inside the house felt tight, heavy, like something always about to snap. Eventually, her in-laws sent her back to China again. Alone. That separation lasted until around 2019. By then, her in-laws bought a house in Whitestone, also in Queens. Xiaomei was brought back once more. The household was full again. Husband, child, parents. Her husband worked construction. Hard work, steady pay. Their daughter was 7 years old then. Online, Xiaomei's social media told a quiet story. Photos with her child. Smiles, outings, small moments. There were no photos with her husband at all. Not one. That kind of absence doesn't need an explanation. You just notice it. Neighbors would later say the family kept to themselves. They didn't socialize. Rarely spoke to anyone nearby. But Xiaomei was different. She stood out. Tall, slender, long black hair. A gentle face people remembered, even after a single meeting. She was often seen walking with her daughter, hand in hand. She smiled when she passed people. She greeted them. Her husband did not. He seemed perpetually angry. Closed off. He never returned greetings. Neighbors described him as tense, difficult to approach, someone who carried irritation with him. The last time anyone remembered seeing Xiaomei freely walking the neighborhood was the summer of 2021. Then one night in August, sirens. Late. Quiet streets suddenly broken open by police cars. Xiaomei had called for help. She reported abuse by her father-in-law. The news moved fast through the neighborhood, whispered between doors and windows. People were shocked, but not entirely surprised. What caused that conflict was never fully understood by outsiders. What was clear is that after that night, Xiaomei left the house. She vanished without explanation. Her in-laws searched. Eventually, they found her and brought her back. But something had shifted. After that, Xiaomei was rarely seen. The walk stopped. The smiles disappeared. The house stayed quiet again, but in a different way. And for the people living nearby, that silence became the most unsettling detail of all. The walk stopped first. People noticed that before anything else. No small figure holding her daughter's hand. No slow loops around the block. No polite nods or soft greetings anymore. It was as if Xiaomei had folded herself inward, retreating behind the doors of that house and staying there. By the time the tragedy unfolded, neighbors would realize something unsettling. They hadn't seen her for months. Not once. There was what everyone already suspected: fear, pressure, exhaustion. But there was also something no one around her knew. Another reason she didn't want to go back. Xiaomei had been seeing someone else. Quietly, carefully. A secret relationship that existed entirely outside her home life. His name was Wan Kuming. He was 52 years old, more than 2 decades older than her. A Chinese American who had come to the United States years earlier. He was born in China in September of 1969, and in the early 2000s, already well into adulthood, he arrived in America as a student. After finishing school, he chose not to return. He stayed. He tried to build something for himself. Over time, his life settled into New York City. There, He married an American woman. They had 2 children together. That marriage also gave him permanent legal status in the country. But stability didn't last forever. In the years leading up to this story, his business struggled. Income became unpredictable, while life in New York remained relentlessly expensive. His children were just over 10 years old then, at an age where school costs and daily care only increase. Eventually, Cumming gave up trying to run his own ventures and began working full-time as a driver. A lot of people end up changing plans like that, not because they want to, but because they have to. Their paths crossed in 2019. Xiaomei had only recently arrived in the United States. A gathering was held within the local Chinese community. Her husband had been invited and, out of courtesy, brought her along. It was the kind of event where introductions mattered, where appearances mattered. Xiaomei prepared carefully that day. Makeup, clothing. She wanted to look composed, elegant. She did, and Cumming noticed. He approached her first. Conversation started simply, life in America, work, family. Nothing unusual. But the exchange lingered. Time slipped by faster than expected. Before the evening ended, they exchanged contact information. After that night, nothing dramatic happened. Messages were rare. Both had families, responsibilities. The connection seemed destined to fade. Until Christmas. Around the holidays that year, Cumming thought of her again. He sent a simple greeting. Nothing heavy, nothing risky, but it reopened a door. From there, the messages became more frequent, warmer, more personal. What Cumming hadn't admitted, even to himself, was that Xiaomei had stayed with him since the party. Her face, her voice, the way she listened. He knew the situation was wrong. They both did. Each had a spouse. Each had obligations that didn't disappear just because feelings existed. For a long time, he kept his thoughts to himself. Then slowly, his restraint weakened. He began asking her out. Meals, movies, small excuses to spend time together. Those meetings continued quietly, one after another. Nearly a year passed before they crossed the line neither of them openly named. They were no longer pretending it was nothing. To avoid discovery, Cumming rented a room in an apartment building on Main Street in Flushing. It became their refuge. When they wanted to meet, both would invent reasons, work, clients, appointments, and slip away from their homes. Things became easier when Xiaomei's husband traveled for work, gone for roughly half a year. With him away, the secrecy loosened. Meetings became frequent. The attachment deepened. So much so that secrecy began to fail. People in the building noticed. Neighbors nearby noticed too. The pair were seen together again and again, walking side by side, standing close, behaving like a couple without trying very hard to hide it. At some point, it stops looking like coincidence. Throughout that time, Cumming was generous with her, attentive, indulgent, and for Xiaomei, who felt unseen and trapped elsewhere, that difference mattered more than she may have realized. Money started filling the quiet spaces. Clothes arrived first. Dresses, shoes, then handbags, recognizable brands, the kind people notice without asking. Eventually, Cumming added her as a user on one of his credit cards. No limits she could see. No questions when she spent. When Xiaomei compared her 2 lives side by side, the difference hurt. With him, there was attention, care, a feeling of being chosen. With her in-laws, there was distance that bordered on cruelty. A husband who barely reacted. A father-in-law who could turn threatening. A mother-in-law who never treated her as belonging. The scale tipped completely. In the Chinese community, quiet rumors began to circulate. Xiaomei had been pregnant with Cumming's child. People spoke in half-sentences, lowered voices. The idea lingered that she believed this child might change everything, that it could force a decision, give Cumming a reason to leave his wife and start over with her. In her mind, a future had already been built. A way out, a life without fear. But when Cumming learned about the pregnancy, his response shattered that vision. He refused to accept the child. There would be no divorce, no new family, no public choice. That's often where fantasy ends, and reality doesn't soften the landing. For Cumming, the relationship had limits. It was something separate from his real life, not something he was willing to sacrifice everything for. Afterward, he tried to smooth over the damage. He paid for care while Xiaomei recovered. He bought more expensive items. As if money could quiet what words had broken. It didn't. Trouble crept in from another direction. His wife began noticing small things that didn't add up. Phone calls taken away from the room. Late returns with vague explanations. expenses that didn't fit any story he told. She trusted her instincts. Without confronting him, she started watching, checking, following patterns. Eventually, she hired a private investigator. The evidence came back clear. Photos, dates, locations. Another woman. When she confronted Cumming, there was no room left to deny anything. She demanded he end it completely. Cornered, he chose quickly. He begged his wife, apologized, promised, swore that Xiaomei would never hear from him again. And then once things calmed down at home, he reached out to Xiaomei anyway. Not to end it, to pause it. He told her they needed time, that his wife was watching, that once things settled, they could go back to seeing each other the way they had before. In his mind, both worlds could still exist. Xiaomei rejected that idea immediately. She had given too much to be hidden now. Too many hopes. Too many risks. Waiting quietly, indefinitely was unbearable. She wanted clarity. A decision. Proof that she mattered more than secrecy. Those opposing demands collided inside the rented room on Main Street. Voices raised. Accusations laid bare. A fight that left nothing resolved. Afterward, silence. For roughly half a month, neither contacted the other. No messages. No meetings. Just space thick with resentment. Then, shortly before everything fell apart, they agreed to see each other again. They met on Main Street, the same place as before. Ate together at a Chinese restaurant. Familiar. Almost normal. Afterward, they returned to the apartment Cumming had rented. The unit was larger than it needed to be. 3 bedrooms, a living room. Cumming only paid for 1 room. The rest belonged to the landlord's family. The landlord, Mr. Wang, lived there with his wife. Their daughter occupied another room, along with her infant son. For family members in total, plus Cumming, quietly renting space within their home. It's strange how close ordinary life can sit next to something unstable, without anyone realizing it. And inside that apartment, the tension that had been building for months had nowhere left to go. That morning began quietly inside the apartment. Mr. Wang's daughter left for work around 9 in the morning. She wouldn't return until 8 that night. Her parents stayed home through the earlier hours and noticed Cumming moving around, nothing unusual. Around 12:30, the couple stepped out to take care of errands and didn't come back until early evening, a little after 5:30. For those hours in between, the apartment was still. Everyone was gone except Cumming. When the Wangs returned, his bedroom door was shut tight. Music drifted out from behind it, loud enough to spill into the hallway. They didn't question it. Tenants kept their own hours. Doors stayed closed. Time passed. By 8:30 that night, their daughter came home. She noticed the same thing her parents had seen earlier. The door still closed, no movement, nothing to suggest anyone had come or gone. Then, at 23 minutes past 11, everything changed. From behind that closed door came shouting. A man and a woman. Voices rising fast, sharp with anger. The argument didn't sound distant or contained. It felt immediate. Mixed into the shouting were heavy sounds, dull impacts, like objects hitting something solid. It didn't sound like a normal argument. It sounded urgent. She didn't hesitate. She called emergency services and told them someone was being attacked inside the apartment. Near midnight, sirens tore through the neighborhood. 2 officers arrived and entered the building. Inside the lobby, they stopped. A man stood there, unmoving, silent, his face empty of expression. On the floor nearby lay a woman, flat on her back. She wasn't moving. Her eyes were closed, and she didn't respond to the noise or the people around her. Blood had soaked into her clothing, especially along her legs. And behind her body, stretching across the floor, was a dark trail. It told its own story, that she hadn't fallen there. She had been pulled. The officers identified the pair as Cumming and Xiaomei. Paramedics arrived minutes later. They checked. They tried. Then they stopped. Xiaomei was pronounced dead at the scene. The officers didn't stay in the lobby. They followed the blood. Up the stairs. Along the floor. The trail led them to the 2nd level and ended at one apartment door. Blood smeared the frame, uneven and unmistakable. Inside, the smell hit first. The bedroom Cumming had rented no longer resembled a place meant for sleep. Blood covered the floor in thick patches, some darkened, others still fresh. The mattress was soaked through. Furniture was splattered. Even the walls bore stains. Glass fragments littered the ground, sharp and scattered, catching the light. Nothing was in place. The room looked torn apart, as if a violent struggle had filled every inch of it. It didn't look accidental. It looked worked over. In the bathroom, officers found rags soaked through, tossed aside. In the closet, they discovered a laundry bag pushed deep out of sight. Inside were towels and a woman's top, all stained. Signs of an attempt to clean. To hide. When they examined Cumming more closely, blood was found on his feet. Even on his underwear. Later, a forensic examination would reveal just how extreme the violence had been. But standing there that night, surrounded by silence and the remains of a fight no one else had seen, the conclusion was already unavoidable. The medical findings came back slowly, piece by piece. There were bruises across Zhao Mei's face and upper body. Her lips were split, marked in a way that suggested repeated blows. Painful injuries, the examiner noted, but not fatal on their own. That wasn't where the examination stopped. The most severe damage was elsewhere. The forensic team documented catastrophic injuries to her pelvic region. The wounds were open, extensive, and unlike anything that could happen accidentally. They concluded she had been assaulted with a blunt object, used with force, again and again. Even areas that should never be injured showed deep tearing, the kind that only comes from deliberate violence. Some findings don't need interpretation. They speak for themselves. When everything was reviewed together, the conclusion was clear. Zhao Mei had been attacked repeatedly in the pelvic area with a blunt object. The trauma caused massive internal damage. Organs were destroyed. Blood loss was extreme. That blood loss is what killed her. Not quickly. Not cleanly. This was not an act meant only to end a life. It was prolonged. Intentional. Cruel. The following day, investigators moved quickly. The Wang family, who owned the apartment, were among the first questioned. Mr. Wang stated that from the moment he and his wife returned home in the early evening until police arrived after his daughter's emergency call, no strangers entered or left the apartment. No visitors. No interruptions. The only person who came in during that time was his daughter, returning from work. She had never gone near Chiu Ming's room. That detail mattered. It meant that for the entire afternoon and evening, Zhao Mei had been inside that room with only one other person. The last person to see her alive. The only person with access. The only one with opportunity. Police named their suspect that same day. Wang Qiuming, 52 years old. He was taken into custody. What unsettled investigators wasn't resistance, it was his calm. No visible fear. No grief. No shock. He didn't react to the news of her death at all. He said nothing. Asked only for a lawyer. Sometimes the silence tells you more than anger ever could. As the investigation continued, officers notified Zhao Mei's husband. He admitted knowing Qiuming casually, through gatherings in the Chinese community. Parties. Social events. But he said he had no idea about the affair. 2 days after the killing, on November 3rd, Qiuming was escorted out of the precinct. Under guard, he was placed into a dark vehicle and driven to court for his first appearance. The image spread quickly. A middle-aged man, expression unchanged, walking past cameras and onlookers. The local community watched closely. Inside the courtroom, Qiuming spoke for the first time. He said he was innocent. He acknowledged meeting Zhao Mei that day. Main Street. A Chinese restaurant. A meal together. Then the apartment. He claimed no one else entered or left while they were there. According to his account, they drank alcohol. She said she wanted to step outside to smoke. He stayed behind, sat down, and fell asleep. When he woke up, he said she was no longer breathing. He claimed panic. Claimed confusion. Said he carried her downstairs and called for help. When prosecutors asked about the blood, the destruction inside the room, the injuries to her body, he said he didn't know how any of it happened. As if the room had changed on its own. It was a story that asked people to ignore what they could see. The judge didn't ignore it. After hearing the account, the court expressed serious doubt. The explanation didn't fit the evidence. Blood does not appear without cause. Injuries like those do not occur without force. Bail was denied. Qiuming was ordered held without release while awaiting trial. Prosecutors filed multiple charges. Second-degree murder. Aggravated sexual abuse. Tampering with evidence, and additional related offenses tied to the attempts to clean and conceal what had happened. And with that ruling, the case shifted from shock into something colder. A long process of reckoning, built on facts that could no longer be argued away. 6 days later, Qiuming stood in court again. Nothing about him appeared different. He denied every charge, just as firmly as before. No visible emotion. No acknowledgement of what had happened to Zhao Mei. His face looked unchanged from the night of his arrest, sealed off. The court set the next formal hearing for late January of 2022, giving both sides time to prepare. But the world was still in the grip of the pandemic. Courts slowed. Calendars shifted. One delay became another. Months turned into years. It wasn't until late September of 2024, almost 3 years after Jiao Mei's death, that the case finally moved forward again. Evidence was laid out. Testimony reviewed. The jury deliberated. They found Wan Qiuming guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing was held in Queens County Supreme Court. The judge imposed a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Even under the most optimistic scenario, Qiuming would not be eligible for parole until decades later. More realistically, he would never leave prison. The district attorney spoke afterward, describing him as a serious danger, someone capable not only of extreme violence, but of calculated behavior after the fact. Some crimes don't end when the violence stops. They continue in what comes next. Investigators had already seen that clearly. After the killing, Qiuming didn't panic. He tried to erase. Blood-stained items were hidden in a laundry bag. Surfaces wiped with rags. The body dragged from the room to the lobby, as if preparing to remove it from the building entirely. The plan failed only because of one phone call. The landlord's daughter acted before he could finish. There was no plausible denial left. As for why it happened, that answer never came. From arrest to conviction, Qiuming said nothing meaningful about motive. He never explained what triggered the violence. But the history between them leaves room for inference. After weeks of silence between them, that final meeting likely reopened the same unresolved demand. Jiao Mei wanted certainty, a future, a public choice, divorce, commitment, and Qiuming refused. What followed may have been an argument that spun out of control. Years of pressure, fear of exposure, anger at being pushed into a corner. Whatever restraint he had left collapsed. People don't always realize how much they're carrying until it breaks. What happened next cannot be undone, and speculation can never fully explain it. What remains is the result. This was not just a criminal case within a single community. It reflects something broader. How secrecy distorts judgment. How unequal relationships create risk. How placing your future in someone who has already chosen another life can become dangerous. Jiao Mei believed in a man who never intended to stand beside her openly. And the cost of that belief was everything. Story 3. By early summer of 2018, Kunming was already warm in that soft, misleading way spring cities can be. Nothing felt wrong at first. Then the messages started appearing. Quiet at first, then everywhere. They moved fast through staff chat rooms and student groups. Screens filling with the same words, copied again and again. A missing person notice. Posted by a man named Zhao Chao, a teacher at Yunnan Arts University. He wrote like someone who hadn't slept. His fiancée, Zhang Yuqin, had vanished from the campus. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. The tone of the city shifted almost overnight. Not loud panic. Something lower. Suspicion. Unease. The kind that settles into daily routines and refuses to leave. Zhang Yuqin had been born in Quanzhou, Hunan Province, in the year 1993. Her life didn't start with stability. When she was barely old enough to remember faces, her parents separated. The marriage ended. Custody went to her mother. Her father faded out so completely that, over time, he became more idea than memory. From that point on, it was just the two of them. Not long after, mother and daughter left their hometown and relocated to Yeyang City. A new place. No safety net. They learned early how to rely on each other, how to keep going without asking for much. By the time Yuqin reached high school, people noticed her. Not quietly. She stood about 5 feet 6 inches, carried herself with ease, and had the kind of presence that drew attention without effort. Teachers liked her. Classmates watched her. She was often described as the school's beauty, though she never acted like someone who believed it. What stood out more was restraint. She understood how hard her mother worked. She didn't ask for extras. She didn't complain. Academically, she was solid, not exceptional. But there was something else. A sense of performance. Expression. Teachers suggested she consider the arts, and she listened. Applying to Yunnan Arts University meant leaving home again. This time alone. She called her mother often. Short check-ins. Reassurance. When others traveled during breaks, Eugene took part-time work instead. Stability mattered more than experience. It sounded like she was always trying to make sure nothing worried her mother. After graduation, she didn't drift. She was placed with the Mingzhu Children's Art Troupe in Yunnan, and slowly became someone the group relied on. Not overnight. Gradually. During one performance, a producer noticed her and passed along her name to a film crew scrambling to cast a female lead. The director chose her quickly. No long audition process. One decision opened another door. Her career didn't explode, not in the way people imagine. It advanced in small, steady steps. Even as she brushed against the entertainment world, her priorities stayed unchanged. She talked more about marriage than fame, more about a future that felt settled. Attention followed her anyway. It always had. But Eugene wasn't careless with relationships. If anything, she moved slowly. She trusted sparingly. By then, her heart was already tied to someone she believed she understood. Zhao Chao. He was her senior at the same university, studying the same field. They met during their college years, not through drama or chance, just proximity. Zhao noticed her immediately. Fell hard. She didn't. Not because she was cold. Because she was focused. At that stage of her life, everything came back to one goal. Finishing her education, finding steady work, and giving her mother a sense of security she'd never had. Romance could wait. So it did. Their relationship didn't flare up the way campus relationships often do. No rush. No spectacle. Just time passing. Familiarity growing. Some connections don't start loudly. They just stay. And years later, when Zhao Chao typed out that missing person notice, all of that history sat quietly behind his words. Their connection didn't surge forward. It edged along. Careful. Measured. Almost deliberate. It wasn't until after graduation that whatever had been quietly forming finally settled into something unmistakably serious. Zhao Chao had a reputation even back then. Talented, yes. But more than that, stubborn in the calmest way. He didn't disappear when things felt slow. He didn't push either. He stayed. Years passed like that. He showed up in small, unremarkable moments. Checking in about classes. Remembering routines. Being present when Eugene was tired, overwhelmed, or simply silent. Nothing dramatic. Just consistency, repeated until it became familiar. That persistence mattered more than grand gestures ever could. Over time, the walls Eugene kept up without even realizing it began to soften. She once told a close friend that no man, from childhood onward, had ever stayed so steadily by her side. No loud promises. No sudden confessions. Just someone there, again and again, long enough to feel safe. It sounds less like romance, and more like reliability. When the answers didn't come, he posted about her disappearance online. And then he made the call he'd been avoiding, to Eugene's mother in Hunan. The distance didn't soften the blow. She nearly collapsed when she heard. She packed immediately, determined to get to Kunming that same night. That kind of call doesn't leave room for thinking. You just move. After 7 in the evening, Zhao Qiao's phone buzzed. A message. It came from Eugene's number. It said her phone had been dropped and damaged. That she was getting it fixed. That he shouldn't keep calling. That she'd be home around 10 that night. At first, it felt like relief. Something solid to hold on to. But when he shared the message with her close friends, the feeling shifted. They slowed down and read it carefully. And the problems began to surface. Eugene was from Hunan, but the phrasing didn't sound like her. The tone carried a local Yunnan flavor she never used. Throughout their relationship, she and Zhao Qiao almost always used WeChat, rarely text messages. Yet this came through as a standard message. And if the phone was broken badly enough to need repair, how was the message sent at all? Even the reassurance felt off. Too neat. Too timed. The longer they sat with it, the colder it felt. A possibility none of them wanted to say out loud began to take shape. That message may not have been sent by Eugene. Once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. Concern quickly spread beyond the university. The case drew the attention of the Chunggang branch of the Kunming Public Security Bureau. Emergency procedures were activated. Officers coordinated with the school and began pulling every lead they could find. Surveillance became the first priority. After reviewing footage across the campus, police identified Eugene's last confirmed appearance. It was at 3:44 in the afternoon on June 15th. In the video, she walked alone past a campus shop. She wore a white shirt, a long black coat, and a short black skirt. Her pace was steady. Her expression calm. There was no sign of distress, no indication that anyone was following her. She looked normal, and then she moved out of frame. About a full day after contact was lost, close to 6 in the evening on June 16th, the search reached a point no one had been prepared for. Police found Eugene in a narrow stream beside the soccer field at Yunnan Arts University, still inside the campus, not far from places students passed every day. Less than a day earlier, she had been seen walking calmly, looking ordinary. The waterway itself was small, a quiet channel, roughly 13 to 16 feet across, running between a hillside slope and the edge of the field. The water wasn't deep. It never had been. That familiarity made the discovery feel even more unreal. Eugene was found in the water. She had no clothing on her body. Her face had been damaged so severely that confirming her identity took time. The campus went silent. Later that night, a little after 8 in the evening, the Chunggang New District Management Committee in Kunming released its first official notice through social media. The message was brief, careful, and heavy. Investigators announced that they had identified a key suspect connected to the case. The person was the owner of a hair salon located inside Yunnan Arts University. His name was Huang Moken. He was 20 years old. That same evening, police took him into custody. Alongside the announcement, authorities urged the public to remain calm. They asked people not to spread rumors or speculate online. They emphasized respect for the victim and her family, warning against the sharing of private details or sensitive material. False information, they said, could interfere with evidence and delay justice. At that point, everything online was moving faster than the facts. During initial questioning, Moken offered his version of events. He claimed Eugene had come in for her usual visit. According to him, an argument broke out over a membership card. He described a struggle, loss of control, an accident. He framed it as something small that spiraled. Investigators didn't accept that explanation. The evidence told a different story, one that didn't involve impulse or sudden anger. The findings showed preparation, control, intent. What had happened was not accidental, and it wasn't brief. Confronted with the accumulated details, Moken eventually confessed. Piece by piece. Under pressure, the sequence came out. On the afternoon of June 15th, Eugene walked into the campus hair salon like she had many times before. She was a regular. She had a membership card with unused credit still on it. To her, the place felt safe, familiar, routine. She had no reason to be cautious. What she didn't know was that the salon had changed hands 2 months earlier. Quietly, the new owner was Moken. When Eugene presented her card, he refused to honor it. He told her the salon had new ownership and no responsibility for past balances. Eugene didn't argue loudly. She didn't make a scene. She showed mild frustration and said it felt unfair. That was all. Seeing her restrained reaction, Moken shifted tactics. He suggested she register for a new membership instead. Framed it as a solution. She hesitated, briefly. Then she agreed. It was around 4 in the afternoon. The salon was unusually empty. No other customers. No interruptions. That's the part that feels ordinary, right before everything isn't anymore. At that moment, aside from Moken himself, Eugene was the only person in the salon. No other customers. No voices. But this was still the university. A place she knew. Quiet didn't feel dangerous there. The shop wasn't large, but it had 2 levels. Moken guided her upstairs, explaining casually that her hair would be washed on the 2nd floor first, then cut and styled downstairs afterward. It sounded routine. Ordinary. Eugene lay back on the shampoo chair without hesitation. Before stepping out, Moken spoke lightly, almost offhand. He said he needed to go downstairs to check her membership information and grab a few things. Nothing about his tone suggested urgency or threat. If Eugene noticed anything at all, it was probably that he seemed a little disorganized. Young, inexperienced, someone rushing through work. She couldn't have known what was actually happening. Downstairs, Moken didn't check any records. He locked the salon door from the inside, cutting off access from the outside world. He put on rubber gloves. He picked up a towel and clear tape. Then he went back upstairs and locked that door too. What followed happened without warning. Eugene was attacked from behind. Her ability to call for help was taken away almost immediately. She fought, instinctively. But the space was small, and she was unprepared. The struggle didn't last long. Minutes later, it was over. Only when her body no longer moved did Moken step back. What happened next was not panic. It was control. Moken went downstairs. He removed the open sign from the door. He taped up a notice saying the shop would be closed for 3 days. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing more than a temporary closure. Inside, he locked the door again. Later, he staged the scene to make it appear as though he had left and returned through a window. Then he went back upstairs. What followed was further violation, an act carried out with cruelty and intent. After that, driven by fear of being identified, he damaged her face deliberately, trying to erase who she was. That's when it stops being about escape and becomes about erasing. When night came, Moken wrapped Yuchin's body, placed it into a large sack, then into a suitcase. He waited for the campus to quiet down. Using the darkness as cover, he moved the suitcase out of the university grounds. Nearby, there was a stream. That is where he left her. He later told police he believed the water would take care of the rest. During questioning, Moken spoke about why he did it. None of it softened what happened. He said that when he saw Yuchin alone, well-dressed, confident, something twisted inside him. Desire mixed with resentment. He admitted those thoughts had been there long before that day. There was also money. To take over the salon, Moken had borrowed heavily. Tens of thousands of US dollars in debt. He had hoped the business would save him. It didn't. Customers were few. Income barely covered rent. Creditors came often. Pressured him. Threatened him. Over time, fear turned into anger. Desperation into distortion. He admitted that even before Yuchin walked in, he had already thought about robbery. When he noticed the phone in her hand, the idea solidified in his mind. In his thinking, she became a solution. To his debt. To his urges. That kind of logic only makes sense once everything else has already broken. Police later summarized the case plainly. A failed business. A warped mindset. Resentment turned outward. Violence inflicted on someone who had done nothing wrong. Yuchin had lived carefully. She worked hard. She trusted easily, but not recklessly. She was building a life step by step. And it ended in a place she thought was safe. What remained was grief. And a silence that no explanation could ever fill. After everything came out, the suffering didn't end. It only changed shape. Zhao Chao was left carrying a weight he couldn't put down. He spoke openly about regret, about replaying that afternoon again and again, wondering what might have changed if he had stayed, if he hadn't gone to teach, if he had walked her to the salon himself. Those thoughts stayed with him. For Yuchin's mother, the loss landed like something physical. The shock nearly destroyed her. She said there was no way to accept what had happened, no way to understand how her daughter could be taken so brutally, in a place that should have been safe. In the end, she chose not to pursue a separate civil lawsuit for money. Compensation meant nothing to her. No amount could undo what had been done. Her only demand was that the person responsible face the harshest punishment allowed by law. When someone is gone like that, money doesn't even enter the conversation. Not long after, reports emerged that the family formally asked Yunnan Arts University to take responsibility and provide compensation. Their reasoning was direct. The campus sits inside a dense university district where people move constantly. Around 4 in the afternoon, when the attack occurred, the area was not deserted. Yet the suspect was able to close the shop, lock doors from inside, move in and out through windows, and remain unseen. None of it triggered alarms. None of it drew intervention. The family believed this wasn't chance, but a failure in campus security and surveillance. They also pointed to what happened after Yuchin was reported missing. Zhao Chao had asked urgently for access to campus camera footage, hoping to trace her last movements. The request was denied at the time, citing the need for administrative approval. To the family, that delay felt devastating. They believed those lost hours may have mattered. The university did not issue a clear public explanation. Responses were indirect, relayed through Yuchin's workplace, stating only that the school wooed whatever responsibility applied. The lack of clarity left questions hanging, both for the family and for the public. Silence like that tends to make people fill in the gaps themselves. The crime happened in 2018. Public records online do not clearly show the final sentence carried out against Moken. Based on common judicial outcomes in similar cases, many believe he likely received the most severe penalty. Whether or not that is true, it changes nothing for those left behind. What happened to Zhang Yuqin remains deeply unsettling. She was young. She was careful. She was building her life step by step, trusting ordinary places, ordinary routines. That trust cost her everything. There is an uncomfortable pattern in stories like this. Gentle people, quiet confidence, harm arriving without warning. This case has often been framed as a warning, especially for women. Not because the victim did something wrong, but because the world is uneven. Some risks don't announce themselves. Being alone in secluded spaces, even during the day, can carry dangers that aren't visible at first glance. Letting someone know where you are. Staying alert. Choosing company when possible. None of these guarantee safety, but they matter. Society holds light and darkness at the same time. Faces don't reveal intentions. And caution, unfair as it may feel, becomes one of the few tools people have to protect themselves. Yuqin didn't fail herself. The world failed her. Story 4. It began with a phone call that felt ordinary enough. Just after 8 in the morning, on the 24th of October, 2005, Tan Sheng-Wang answered his supervisor. He was told to head to the Inland Revenue Department building in Hong Kong. Routine inspection. Air conditioning. Nothing urgent in the voice on the line. Tan was in his early 50s. Maintenance work was familiar territory. He grabbed the same toolbox he had carried for years and left almost immediately, moving on habit rather than thought. By around 9 in the morning, he was inside the building. Elevator up. 33rd floor. The offices of the Environmental Protection Department. 2 co-workers were already there. They exchanged a few words, nothing memorable, and started their checks. Fans. Ducts. The usual hum of machinery above the ceiling. Late morning drifted into early afternoon without incident. Then, sometime around 12:30, Tan stepped into the fan room alone. The room was dim. Industrial. He climbed a ladder, reaching the top of an air handling unit nearly 10 feet off the floor. And that was when he noticed something that didn't belong there. A dark shape. Swollen. Human in outline, but wrong somehow. One end was covered with a red plastic bag. For a moment, his mind reached for a harmless explanation. The light was poor. The shape was large. He wondered if one of his heavier co-workers had been electrocuted and collapsed up there. He didn't move closer right away. When the others arrived, the 3 men stood there quietly, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. From a distance, it looked artificial. Too still. Like a mannequin. Someone joked weakly that it might be a doll. One of them lifted an umbrella and nudged the shape. First the chest, then the abdomen. The resistance was wrong. The surface too soft. That was when they understood what it was. I think that's the moment when a normal workday just stops existing. After that, nothing feels routine anymore. They backed out of the room quickly, adrenaline replacing confusion. Down the corridor, they found a security guard named Huang and asked him to call the police. No arguments. No delays. More than 20 minutes passed before officers from the Wan Chai Serious Crime Squad arrived. When they did, the floor changed character. Barriers went up. The entire 33rd level was sealed. No one in. No one out. White protective suits appeared next, moving slowly into the fan room. The forensic team approached the body with practiced caution, documenting everything before touching anything. The first conclusions came quietly. The remains belonged to an adult woman. Time had not been kind. Decomposition was advanced. Her face no longer carried identifiable features. Swelling had altered her body enough that even estimating her age was difficult. The usual markers were gone. There was, however, an injury that stood out, a deep stab wound on the right side of her chest. Whether it was the cause of death could not yet be confirmed. The body had been there too long to say. When decomposition reaches that stage, answers slow down. Everything becomes harder to read. Investigators stayed in the fan room for hours. It was smaller than people imagine when they hear the word. Roughly 7 feet long, 8 feet wide, 6 feet high. A metal cabinet sat raised on an iron frame, its base about 2 feet above the floor. The ceiling hovered close overhead, leaving little room to maneuver. That cabinet mattered. The woman's body was lying face up on top of it. Her head was completely covered by a bright red plastic bag, knotted tightly at the neck. Her arms were pulled behind her back and secured with 2 black straps. Not loosely, purposefully. Whoever left her there had made sure she couldn't move. She was dressed simply. A white short-sleeved shirt. Dark trousers. Nothing that immediately suggested wealth or status. Until they looked closer. On her left wrist was a gold Rolex. Alongside it, a Tiffany bracelet. Both clean. Both intact. Her ears told a similar story. Pearls. Gold. Not mismatched. Chosen. Altogether, the jewelry alone could have been worth tens of thousands of dollars in U.S. currency. What struck me was that nothing seemed taken. That usually means the motive is somewhere else. The fan room stayed quiet after that. Too quiet. Near the woman's head, something else had been placed with care. A pair of black, open-toed Chanel heels sat side by side, aligned neatly, almost ceremonially. Not kicked aside. Not dropped. Positioned. That detail unsettled investigators more than the jewelry. The watch. The bracelet. The earrings. The shoes. None of it had been taken. Whoever left her there had made a decision not to touch any of it. If money was the motive, this scene made no sense. The question shifted quietly. If it wasn't theft, then what was it? Forensic officers focused on the fan cabinet next. They dusted every reachable surface. The metal frame. The edges. The areas closest to where the body rested. Specialized tools. Careful passes. Nothing appeared. No usable fingerprints at all. That absence spoke loudly. It suggested time. Deliberate effort. Someone who stayed long enough to clean, to wipe, to remove themselves from the room before leaving it behind. Scenes like that don't happen quickly. Someone had time to think. When the search widened, the silence broke. On the insulation cotton wrapped around the cabinet, faint dark stains were found. On the surface of the door, and most clearly, on the door handle itself. Old blood. Dried. Browned with time. Each stain was documented, sealed, and sent to the lab. DNA, they hoped, might speak where the room refused to. Still, nothing answered the simplest question. Who is she? No identification. No bag. No phone. No papers anywhere on the floor. Because the location was a government building, senior officials arrived quickly. The director of the Environmental Protection Department. Other administrators from the Inland Revenue Building. They were shown photographs of the woman's clothing. Close-ups of the jewelry. No one recognized her. She was a stranger inside a place where strangers weren't supposed to be. With nowhere else to turn, the body was transported to the morgue for deeper examination. At the same time, another process began. Investigators collected surveillance footage. Not just from that day. Weeks. Months. Every entrance and exit. Every camera near the 33rd floor. They gathered it all. By evening, the first forensic profile arrived. The woman was believed to be around 40 years old. About 5 feet 1. Roughly 97 pounds. Long black hair. Small frame. Her chest and neck showed multiple scratch marks. Not defensive wounds exactly, but signs of movement, of resistance, of something happening before everything stopped. The stab wound on her right chest was deep, entering the chest cavity, but forensics did not believe it alone caused her death. Another result shifted the tone again. Anesthetic substances were present in her system. The theory formed quietly. She may have been rendered unconscious before dying from lack of air. The final cause still required confirmation, but the picture was darkening. Once drugs enter the story, the timeline usually stretches. It's rarely sudden. There was one more finding investigators couldn't ignore. Though she was fully clothed, her private area showed signs of having been cleaned with a chemical solution. No usable biological material remained. It raised an obvious possibility. Evidence removal. But without samples, it stayed only a question. When everything was considered together, one conclusion stood firm. This was not impulsive. This was planned. So attention returned to the beginning. Who is she, and why bring her here? That evening, the story broke across Hong Kong. A government building. A hidden body. Very few details. Images of police tape and flashing lights filled television screens. And then the phone rang. On the line was Ms. May Peek Chin, the Thai Vice Consul General in Hong Kong. She had been watching the broadcast when something felt familiar. The description. The build. The jewelry. Too close to ignore. She told police the woman might be Chariter Kamal Noranath, also known by the Chinese name Si Liping, a Thai-Chinese businesswoman who had been missing for more than 10 days. According to the consul, on the 13th of October, Liping's boyfriend, an Australian photographer named Muller, had come to the Thai consulate visibly distressed. He had asked for help. He had also already reported her disappearance to Hong Kong police. That's usually when a case changes direction, when a name finally enters the room. Police moved quickly once the call came in. The name matched something already in their system. Chariter Kamal Noranath, also known as Ji Liping. Her disappearance had been formally reported days earlier. Patrol officers had circulated her photograph, checked places she was known to visit, asked questions where questions could be asked. For more than a week, nothing came back. One detail stood out when records were reviewed more closely. She had not left Hong Kong. Immigration data was clear on that point. From the day she arrived, there was no record of her departure, which meant the city hadn't lost her. She was still here. The following day, Mueller was taken to the morgue. The process was brief. He didn't linger. He didn't need to. He confirmed what everyone already suspected. The woman found in the Inland Revenue building was Liping. By that same evening, her younger sister arrived from the United States. Li Dai flew straight to Hong Kong, barely stopping before meeting investigators. She wanted to help. She needed to know what had happened. DNA testing later removed any remaining doubt. The identification was official now. Once her name was known, the case shifted again. Interviews began immediately. Family members, friends, business contacts. Mueller. Piece by piece, Liping's life started to take shape. She was 40 years old, born in Thailand, but originally from Shaozhou in Guangdong, the eldest daughter in her family. Her father had built his fortune slowly, moving from gemstone mining in Thailand and Myanmar to operating a large diamond mine in Madagascar. Over time, the family became deeply rooted in the jewelry trade, while known extremely wealthy. There were only 2 daughters, Liping and her younger sister, Li Dai, just a year apart. They grew up surrounded by comfort, travel, education abroad. During her university years, Liping studied in the United States. She spoke English, Thai, and Mandarin fluently, and could manage basic Cantonese when needed. After graduation, she returned to Bangkok and stepped into the family business. From the outside, she looked like someone with a clear future laid out in front of her. Someone expected to inherit power and expand it. Instead, she married young. At 23, she married a man named Alec, 5 years older than her. For a time, the marriage seemed stable, quiet, but there was one absence they couldn't fill. They never had children. Liping suffered repeated miscarriages, and her health weakened. Over time, the strain showed. In 2003, they chose to separate. Not bitterly. They remained on good terms. Liping even entrusted her former husband with managing one of the jewelry stores within the family's department store chain. That same year, her father died in a car accident in Madagascar. That's a lot of loss packed into a short time. People don't always notice how much that changes someone. With her father gone, everything shifted. There were no sons in the family. Her sister was already married and living in the United States. The responsibility for the entire business fell onto Liping alone. She took it on. Her life became a pattern of airports and meetings. Singapore, Myanmar, Hong Kong, negotiations, inspections, expansion plans, always moving. It was during this period that she met Mueller. He was 28, Australian, a photographer and film production consultant, 10 years younger. Different background, different pace, but the connection formed quickly. Against expectations, they became a couple. Mueller's work brought him to Hong Kong often. Liping, meanwhile, had a fondness for the city. She was especially drawn to Hong Kong Disneyland and had long talked about expanding her business there. So in October, they planned the trip together. They checked into the Jinghua International Hotel on Waterloo Road. Despite the travel and the workload, Liping kept one habit unchanged: her connection to her sister. Even across continents, they spoke nearly every 2 days. Sometimes briefly, sometimes longer. That was why, after checking into the hotel, Liping did one thing before anything else. She picked up the phone and called home. When someone keeps routines like that, it usually means they expect to keep going. She sounded happy when she talked about the plan. A couple of days for work. Meetings, paperwork, loose ends. Then a full day at Hong Kong Disneyland on the 13th. After that, back to Bangkok on the 14th. It felt settled. Ordinary. Like someone who believed time was still on her side. Early on the morning of October 11th, Mueller had to leave for his film job. Before he went, he called Liping with a small favor. He needed a film production reference book, kept at the Film Services Coordination Office under the Television and Entertainment Licensing Authority. The office was on the 40th floor of the Inland Revenue building. Could she pick it up for him? She agreed without hesitation. She already planned to be there. Liping intended to visit the 9th floor as well, to ask about procedures for opening a jewelry store in Hong Kong. But when she arrived, she found the building unusually quiet. It was Chungyung Festival. A public holiday. Offices closed. No staff. No counters open. There was nothing she could do. So she left and went back to the hotel, deciding she would return the next day. Around noon on October 12th, Muller was still busy with work. At roughly the same time, Leiping sent a message to her ex-husband Alec. "I still can't let go." He didn't see it. 2 hours later, she called Muller. Her voice sounded light. She told him she was heading to Tsim Sha Tsui to shop and would pick up his book along the way. Nothing in the call suggested worry or tension. After hanging up, she took her bag, left the hotel on Waterloo Road, boarded the hotel shuttle to the Tsim Sha Tsui Star Ferry Pier, then crossed the harbor by ferry to Wan Chai. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. When someone leaves with plans like that, no one thinks it's a goodbye. That evening, her sister Li Dai called, as she usually did. The call didn't connect. She tried again. Still nothing. Leiping's phone was off. The silence felt wrong. Li Dai called Muller immediately. He was just as confused. Leiping hadn't returned to the hotel. He hadn't heard from her since the afternoon. He assumed she was still out. By the morning of October 13th, that assumption collapsed. Leiping hadn't come back overnight. Her phone was still unreachable. Muller went out searching on his own, heading first to the Inland Revenue Building, hoping she might be there. She wasn't. With no other leads, he went to the Thai consulate in Hong Kong to ask for help. He also formally reported her missing to the police. When Li Dai learned how serious the situation had become, she contacted Alec, her sister's former husband. She told him what was happening. If Leiping didn't appear by the next day, she asked him to come to Hong Kong to help look for her. On October 16th, nearly 4 days after Leiping disappeared, there was still no sign of her. Alec flew in and met Muller for the first time. It was only after landing that Alec noticed the unread message on his phone. The one Leiping had sent at noon on the 12th. "I still can't let go." Messages like that don't explain themselves. They just sit there and wait. For investigators, the questions multiplied. Leiping and Muller were in the early, intense stage of a relationship. So why reach out to an ex-husband like that? What had she been thinking in those final hours? And then there was the larger question. Motive. If this had been sexual in nature, the setting didn't fit. A government office building. Busy during the day. Controlled access. Risk everywhere. If it was robbery, the scene made even less sense. Her jewelry. Her watch. Her bracelet. All untouched. Revenge raised its own problems. Leiping wasn't a local resident. She didn't live in Hong Kong long enough to build deep personal conflicts there. Police considered jealousy. Considered Muller. Considered Alec. Even the idea of a hired killing was examined, though Alec's movements were accounted for. One theory was slowly pushed aside. This didn't look like a crime driven by sudden emotion. Murders born from passion are usually hidden. Covered. Disguised. Valuables taken to confuse the story. This case did the opposite. And then one detail began to stand out. Among everything she had on her that day, only one item was missing. The handbag she carried when she left the hotel. Nothing else. The handbag mattered more than it first appeared. Inside it were the things people don't leave behind by choice. Her passport, a diamond ring, 2 mobile phones, some cash, and 1 credit card. That card surfaced before dawn on October 14th. An attempt was made at an automated teller machine inside the Taiwa State Shopping Center in Taipa. The withdrawal request was for about $2,500. The wrong PIN was entered again and again. After the 4th try, the machine kept the card. Whoever was standing there didn't get the money. Mistakes like that usually mean pressure, or someone guessing. While the card was being traced, another line of work expanded quietly. Police began mapping every person who had entered or left the Inland Revenue Building in the 10 days before the body was found. Under normal conditions, the fan room wasn't accessible. It sat deep inside the office area, behind controlled access points. But early October had changed the rhythm of the building. Repairs were underway. Maintenance crews from outside companies came and went daily. Doors opened more often. Faces blended. The fan room also happened to sit close to the elevator. Investigators leaned heavily on surveillance. The building was dense with cameras. Corridors. Entrances. Workspaces. Almost everything was covered. Almost. The elevator area on the 33rd floor had no cameras at all. One blind spot. The only one. It wasn't obvious unless you already knew the layout. That detail shifted how police thought about the killer. This didn't feel like a chance encounter. It suggested familiarity. Someone who understood where eyes existed and where they didn't. Someone who had spent time inside that building. There was another problem that wouldn't go away. The body had been placed nearly 10 feet above the ground, on top of the air handling equipment. Liping was small, yes, but lifting a person, climbing a ladder, and positioning a body in that confined space would be extremely difficult for one individual alone. Investigators began leaning toward the idea that more than one person had been involved. In the days that followed, interviews became routine. Building staff, contract workers, maintenance crews. Names were checked, timelines verified. A few people raised eyebrows at first. Some behavior fell off, but one by one, they were cleared. Alibis held. Evidence didn't connect. At the same time, police reviewed footage from nearby transit stations for exits near the Inland Revenue Building. On the afternoon of October 12th, Liping appeared there, walking, moving with purpose. She had come to the area as planned, but inside the building itself, there was nothing. No camera captured her entry. That kind of absence isn't empty. It usually means something blocked the view. On November 2nd, her body was cremated in Hong Kong. Her family carried the ashes back to Thailand. Months passed, then more. In late January of 2006, Liping's sister and her boyfriend announced a reward through police. Roughly $90,000 for information that could move the case forward. Tips came in. None changed anything. The silence weighed heavily on the Z family. It spread outward too. Mueller's film project was halted. The reason was uncomfortable. He had come to Hong Kong to work on a thriller called Count to 10. The story centered on a strange killing inside a government office building. Some of the details mirrored Liping's death closely enough to unsettle the crew. Too close to dismiss. Too strange to explain. Was it coincidence? Or imitation? Years went by. 3 of them. The Inland Revenue Building case remained open. Unanswered. Then, during work on an entirely different investigation, police noticed something familiar. On the 15th of May, 2008, just before dawn, Xu Jun, a cargo department manager at Yijiong Aviation Services Company, received a message. It came from Chu Xiaoyan, a ground staff employee. She wrote that a friend was in trouble, that she needed to leave Hong Kong for a few days. She asked him to request leave on her behalf. Xu Jun was caught off guard. Chu Xiaoyan wasn't just a co-worker. She was his girlfriend. And this was the first time he had ever heard about any friend in trouble. The message wouldn't leave his head. Xu Jun replayed it again and again. Something about it didn't sit right. Leaving Hong Kong at 5 in the morning, for a friend. Urgent enough to disappear, but not urgent enough to make a phone call. The company ran around the clock. If Chu Xiaoyan could send a text, she could have called a supervisor directly. They didn't even work in the same department. That was the first problem. The second was timing. Xiaoyan's shifts ran from noon until midnight. After work, she usually took airport bus E41, getting off near the Ting Kok Road fire station just after 1:30 in the morning. From there, she walked home. About 20 minutes. Quiet streets. Poorly lit. Xu Jun had worried about that walk more than once. Was that message even written by her? He called her phone. No answer. Tried again. Powered off. The unease hardened into fear. He contacted her family. Friends. Anyone who might have seen her. They searched through the Kam Shan area where she lived, retracing routes she used every day. Calls went unanswered. Hours passed. By afternoon, she hadn't shown up for work. Around 3 o'clock, when everyone was already drained, Xiaoyan's father received a message. It came from her number. Dad, I urgently need money to help a friend. Please transfer funds to my bank account. I'll be home in 3 to 4 days. Don't worry. That changed everything. Once money enters the message, the fear becomes real. Her father and Xu Jun went straight to the police. But less than a day had passed. There were no visible signs of violence. No confirmed threat. Police logged the report and passed it to the missing persons unit the next morning. Detectives spoke briefly with Xu Jun at the airport. Nothing stood out. It looked, on the surface, like a domestic argument, or exhaustion, or someone needing space. The case didn't escalate. The family understood the limits. Without proof, there was only waiting and watching. On the morning of May 17th, Xiaoyan's mother and Xu Jun went to the bank. The account told a different story. At around 1:50 in the morning on May 15th, a small withdrawal had been made. About $50. Roughly half an hour later, another withdrawal. This time, close to $2,450. Same shopping center. Taiwan Estate. The next day, another withdrawal. Around $2,500. A different automated teller machine, but still inside the same shopping center. The balance dropped sharply. 2 days later, early on the morning of May 19th, her mother returned to the bank. The remaining funds were gone. Withdrawn the previous evening. That was enough. The family went back to the police. This time, the response changed. An investigation was opened immediately. The early assessment was grim. It appeared Xiaoyan had been targeted while withdrawing money. Forced to reveal her PIN. Taken. But hope lingered. If this was robbery, she might still be alive. Police didn't rule out another possibility. Someone she knew. Interviews painted a picture. Xiaoyan was young. 21. Calm. Responsible. She had always drawn attention. Admirers followed her from school into adult life. One name kept resurfacing. Zhu Yongqiang. They had dated in high school. Lived in the same Taiwan Estate area. Fell into a relationship quickly. It lasted 4 years. Ended on her family's advice. She moved on. He didn't. After the breakup, Yongqiang struggled deeply. Depression. Withdrawal. It took months before he stabilized. And there was something else that police couldn't ignore. Every withdrawal had happened near his home. Patterns don't prove anything, but they do narrow the room. Yongqiang was added to the list. Then, on the evening of May 19th, Xu Zhen received another message. It came from Xiaoyan's phone. Just one line. Ransom between 10,000 and 500,000. Your choice. No greeting. No explanation. Panic set in immediately. Xu Zhen contacted Xiaoyan's father. They didn't debate it. They went straight back to the police. The case had crossed a line. The case shifted hands quietly. Team 3 of the New Territories North Regional Crime Unit took control. Their first move wasn't force. It was patience. Xu Zhen was told to keep replying. Stay calm. Sound cooperative. Negotiate. The goal wasn't the money. It was time. The ransom was talked down to roughly $12,500. While the messages continued, technicians worked in the background, tracing where the signals were bouncing from. The pattern slowly tightened. 3 areas kept repeating. Taipa, Kuntong, Yaomati. Those places weren't random. After his depression eased, Zhu Yongqiang had bought a truck and started transport work. His routes took him between Kuntong and Yaomati almost daily. Taipa was home. The distances involved were long enough that most people wouldn't casually move between all 3 in a single day. But he did. When locations line up like that, attention tends to settle in one place. By the evening of May 21st, police learned Zhu Yongqiang was heading to Kuntong for a delivery. Officers positioned themselves along his expected route, using trucks to blend in. Just after 9 that night, his vehicle appeared. What happened next was fast and chaotic. More than a dozen men moved in at once. No warnings. No explanations. They forced their way into the truck, shouting one question again and again. Where is Chu Xiaoyan? Zhu Yongqiang was stunned. He fought back, confused, terrified, insisting he didn't know. The response didn't matter. He was taken in immediately. At the station, he stuck to his story. He said he didn't even know Xiaoyan was missing. A search turned up no phone. No ransom money. Nothing linking him directly to the messages. So police tried something else. Xu Zhen sent another message. The reply came at noon the next day. Zhu Yongqiang was still in the interrogation room when it arrived. That stopped everyone cold. Either he was innocent, or he wasn't alone. That's when certainty usually slips. Too many possibilities at once. The plan continued. Xu Zhen was told to follow instructions exactly. At 8 that evening, he placed the agreed ransom into a white bag and boarded Kowloon Motor Bus Route 72X, leaving the bag on a seat as directed. Officers watched closely. One man stood out. He was texting continuously. Telecom tracking confirmed it. The signal matched Xiaoyan's number. Police held back. If Xiaoyan was still alive, rushing could cost her life. They followed him quietly as the bus route ended back in Taipa. At 9:50 that night, the suspect entered apartment number 1 in Juho House, Taiwan Estate, carrying the bag. That was the moment. Superintendent Kong Saiching gave the order. Detectives rushed in. 4 people were inside. All were detained. On one of them, police found a phone containing Xiaoyan's SIM card. The ransom money was recovered. In the bedroom, Personal items believed to belong to her were found. Several others were questioned briefly and released almost immediately. Just before dawn, the 4 detained suspects were transferred to the Thai Regional Crime Unit. At around 5:30 in the morning, one of them broke. His name was Su Jintang. He was 25 years old. He confessed to killing Chu Xiaoyan. Confessions don't bring relief. They just open a heavier door. Su Jintang hadn't finished high school. He went straight into work, eventually becoming an air conditioning repair technician. He lived with his parents in the Taiwan residential area. They ran a small fish fillet shop nearby. He was known as withdrawn, quiet, isolated, and he gambled. Years earlier, he had piled up more than $12,500 in high-interest gambling debt in Macau. His family and friends struggled to pay it off, piece by piece. The lesson didn't stick. Months before the crime, he borrowed close to $8,750 from a loan company, claiming he planned to study abroad in Taiwan. Instead, the money vanished into nights of food, alcohol, and crowds. By April of 2008, repayment demands started arriving. He had nothing. According to his confession, that was when the idea formed. 10 days before the killing, Su Jintang began scouting locations to hide a body. He chose the Lam Tsuan River irrigation channel. The water there was shallow, barely an inch deep. Bodies wouldn't drift. Few people passed by. It was quiet, prepared, deliberate, and waiting. Just after 1:30 in the morning on May 15th, Su Jintang was already moving. He carried a knife and waited near the Taiwan State Shopping Center, watching the late-night foot traffic thin out. He wasn't looking for anyone specific. Just a woman alone. Someone tired. Someone distracted. That's when he noticed Chu Xiaoyan. She was at an automated teller machine, withdrawing cash. She was holding a designer bag. That was enough. He stayed back, letting her walk ahead, following at a distance until the lights faded and the noise dropped away. Near an overpass by the irrigation channel, he closed the gap. He grabbed her by the neck and forced her beneath the bridge, pressing the blade close and telling her to give up her bank card PIN. He told her he would let her live if she cooperated. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She gave him the number. She never had a chance. Before he even checked whether the PIN was correct, he tightened his grip and ended her life. It took minutes. Not long enough for help. Not long enough for anyone to pass by. Some crimes aren't chaotic. They're terrifyingly fast. He dragged her body to a nearby pile of straw and covered her. Then he took the card and withdrew nearly $2,450. After that, he went home. But he wasn't done. He returned with cleaning supplies. He went back to the body. During the struggle, she had scratched him. He knew that. He also knew what that meant. So he cleaned her thoroughly, trying to erase what she had left behind. Then he pulled her body into the drainage system. The bag, the gaming device, the phone, the battery, the knife. One by one, he threw them into the Lam Tsuan River. Because the bank card had daily withdrawal limits, he couldn't take all the money at once. So he kept her SIM card and used it to send messages. To her father, to Sujin, buying time. But the money didn't go where he said it would. Instead of paying debts, he went shopping, drinking, karaoke, Mongkok, friends. Within 4 days, nearly all of it was gone. On May 19th, the loan company came again. That was when he panicked. He believed Xiaoyan's family hadn't gone to police. He thought the body hadn't been found. So he sent the ransom message, hoping for more cash. After his arrest, he led officers to the irrigation channel. There, they found Chu Xiaoyan's body. The case, at least on paper, was closed. Finding someone doesn't undo anything. It just ends the waiting. Zhu Yongqiang, Xiaoyan's former boyfriend, was released. He had nothing to do with it, but detectives weren't finished. Because as they reviewed everything again, another case resurfaced. One from 3 years earlier. The woman found inside the Inland Revenue Building. Xi Liping. The similarities were hard to ignore. After Liping disappeared, her credit card had been used at automated teller machines in the Taiwan State Shopping Center. The same place Xiaoyan's card was drained. Forensics had found signs of cleaning solution on Liping's body. Su Jintang had done the same thing. Neither body was hidden in a truly remote place. They weren't meant to vanish forever. And the way Xiaoyan's murder was carried out, deliberate, controlled, rehearsed, it didn't feel like a first crime. There was more. At the time of Liping's death, Su Jintang worked in air conditioning repair. He had been assigned to the tax building. His home was near Taiwa Estate. His name had appeared in early police interviews back then. He had even been flagged. When investigators reviewed old surveillance footage, they saw him again, wearing a baseball cap, walking near the building, talking with another man. That man mattered. Sometimes cases don't reopen. They just finish slowly. The second man was identified as Gu Jihui, an old schoolmate of Su Jintang, another air conditioning worker, someone who drank, gambled, and moved in the same circles. On June 6, 2008, police asked Gu Jihui to come in and assist with the investigation. At first, he denied everything. He admitted he'd been with Su Jintang that day, but said they'd only gone to the Labor Department. He claimed he never entered the Inland Revenue building. The records proved otherwise. Investigators laid it out plainly. If he kept lying, he would be charged in Chu Xiaoyan's murder. If he told the truth, he might become a witness. Gu Jihui broke. He confessed to helping Su Jintang move and dispose of Ji Liping's body. The pieces finally aligned. On October 12, 2005, Gu Jihui met Su Jintang as arranged. Together, they went into the Inland Revenue building. Together, they went up to the 33rd floor. And from there, the fan room was only a few steps away. Before they went in, Su Jintang told Gu Jihui to put on work gloves. No explanation, just an order. He led him down the corridor and into the fan room. Inside, the space looked much like any other maintenance area. 2 fan units, one taller, one shorter, and a heap of old newspapers scattered across the floor, as if they'd been left there without thought. Su Jintang nudged the papers aside with his foot. That was when Jihui saw her. A woman lay face down on the floor. Still, her head sealed inside a red plastic bag. There was no movement, no sound. The sight froze him. Su Jintang didn't pause. He pulled out a knife, crouched, turned the body over, and began touching her methodically as if checking something. Then he looked up and told Jihui to do the same. Jihui hesitated. The knife caught the light. He complied. Some moments don't feel real until much later. They just happen too fast. After that, Su Jintang took out a bottle of cleaning solution and poured it over the woman's body. He wiped her down carefully. When he finished, he cleaned the fan room door, gathered the newspapers, and carried them out. They left the building together. They went to Mongkok to drink and party, as if the day hadn't changed anything. Later that year, after Liping's body was discovered, police questioned Su Jintang. They had suspicions, but nothing solid. No evidence they could hold. He walked away, and he enjoyed that. At a later gathering, he showed Gu Jihui a diamond ring and a mobile phone. He said they belonged to Ji Liping. Then casually he described how he had done it. He knew the building well. He knew which elevator had no camera. Elevator number 13. That day he waited near it, watching people step out. Liping caught his eye immediately. Well-dressed. Confident. Someone who looked like money. He followed her. When she wasn't paying attention, he pressed a knife into her back and forced her into the fan room. He said he didn't plan to kill her, only to get her bank card pin. He stabbed her once from behind, took her bag, and left to withdraw cash. His clothes were soaked, so he used paint to cover the stains. When he came back, she was already dead. If robbery was the goal, why leave the Rolex? Because he understood watches. Each movement had a unique serial number, impossible to sell without being traced. So he left it behind. The pearl earrings were expensive but difficult to resell. The bracelet, he thought, was fake. The shoes meant nothing to him. Every choice was calculated. That kind of thinking doesn't come from panic. It comes from planning. No one had imagined something like this could happen inside a government office building. But now, police finally had the missing pieces. Gu Jihui was charged as a witness for the prosecution. In exchange for truthful testimony, charges related to concealing and mistreating a body would be dropped. Investigators searched Su Jintang's home again. This time, they found a mobile phone believed to belong to Liping. They also recovered a knife. Forensics confirmed it matched the stab wound in Liping's back, the one that penetrated her chest cavity. It was the weapon. On March 17, 2009, the case involving Chu Xiaoyan went to trial. The proceedings lasted 2 weeks. When the verdict came down, Su Jintang was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. For the extortion, he received an additional sentence of 5 years and 4 months, to be served at the same time. A year later, in March of 2010, the Liping case reached the High Court. Family members filled the courtroom. Liping's sister, other relatives. Xiaoyan's family sat there too, bound together by loss they never asked to share. Su Jintang said nothing. He chose not to testify. He stayed silent through the entire trial, staring coldly toward the family seating, offering no explanation. Silence can be its own kind of ending. The final days of the trial moved quickly. On the 3rd of March, forensic specialists took the stand. They confirmed that the knife recovered from Su Jintang's home matched the wound found on Ji Liping's body. They also explained their conclusion about how she died. After losing consciousness, likely from restraint and lack of air, she did not recover. The next day, Gu Jihui testified. He spoke about the fan room, the gloves, the newspapers, the cleaning solution. His voice wavered at times, but he stayed with the account. Listening to someone describe a place like that, you can tell they're remembering, not imagining. By the 8th of March, both sides were finished. The courtroom settled into a strange stillness as closing arguments were delivered. The defense focused on doubt. Su Jintang's lawyer pointed to inconsistencies in Gu Jihui's testimony. Timelines that didn't line up perfectly. Details that seemed vague. He argued that the story had been shaped under pressure. On the 9th of March, the jury withdrew. 3 hours later, they returned. Their decision was unanimous. Su Jintang was found guilty of murdering Ji Liping. The sentence was life imprisonment. The room reacted quietly. No shouting. No relief. Just the sound of chairs shifting and people standing. Afterward, outside the courtroom, Chu Xiaoyan's father could not contain his anger. He accused police of failing his daughter. He said that if Su Jintang had been stopped years earlier, after Liping's death, Xiaoyan would still be alive. That the warning signs had been there. That he had been questioned once, and then released. Grief doesn't follow court schedules. It keeps asking the same questions. 2 women, 3 years apart. 1 man who moved unnoticed between ordinary spaces. A fan room, a bus stop, a shopping center. The cases left behind a quiet truth. Danger doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for the right kind of place. Sometimes it appears where people feel safest. Sometimes it waits where no one is watching. And often, it isn't recognized until it's far too late. Story 5. The date had been circled for so long that it almost stopped feeling real. Mid-December of 2025 was supposed to close a decade-long relationship, a quiet promise finally made public. Mark Reyes was ready to marry Shara Dewan. 10 years together. Plans stacked on plans. Families aligned. Everything aimed toward one morning inside a cathedral in Quezon City. Instead, people arrived to a blocked entrance. Yellow tape stretched where flowers should have been. Police moved in slow lines, writing things down, not meeting anyone's eyes. The building felt hollow, like the sound had been taken out of it. No music. No guests laughing too loudly. Just procedure. Online, her face traveled faster than the truth ever could. A wedding photo, cropped into a missing notice, shared and reshared. Mark stood in front of microphones that didn't wait for him to breathe. He said he didn't care about the ceremony anymore. He just wanted her back alive. The sentence came apart as he spoke it. It was strange seeing a wedding photo used that way. It didn't look like it belonged to a search. For days earlier feels smaller when you say it out loud. Just a few mornings before everything collapsed. That day didn't carry any warning signs. People who saw Shara that morning remember ordinary things. Normal tone. Normal movement. If anything, she was lighter than usual. The kind of energy that comes from counting days instead of hours. Early afternoon, a delivery arrived at the Dewan home. A large box, handled carefully. Inside was the dress. Made to fit her, ordered months in advance. White fabric folded into itself, like it was holding its breath. She took it straight to her room. Not long after, she stepped back into the living area and faced the mirror there. She turned slowly, checking how the fabric moved, how the train followed her steps. It fit the way she had imagined. Clothes at the waist. Clean lines. For a moment, everything matched the picture she had carried in her head. Then she noticed the shoes. They weren't wrong exactly. Just off. The length of the train didn't fall the way she wanted when she stood still. It bothered her more than she expected. Enough that she kept looking back at the mirror, measuring the problem without saying much. Perfection doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up as a small imbalance you can't ignore. She decided she needed a different pair. Something with the right height. A small adjustment, but in her mind a necessary one. She told her family she was going out to buy shoes. Nothing about it sounded urgent. Nothing about it sounded risky. Her destination was Fairview Central Mall. Locals just call it FCM. It sat a short distance away, familiar enough that directions were unnecessary. A quick ride. A place she had gone to many times before without incident. She checked how she would get there. Then she picked up her phone. A little after 1 in the afternoon, she sent Mark a message. Just a line saying she was heading to the mall to look for shoes. He was at work, buried in deadlines and meetings, reading it between tasks. He replied with an emoji. The kind of response you send when nothing feels fragile. Then he went back to his screen. Later, investigators would return to that message again and again. Not because of what it said, but because of what came after. At the time, it probably felt like one of those messages you forget you even sent. After that, Shara did something that barely registered as a choice. She left her phone behind. No battery issue. No argument. Just an ordinary decision made in an ordinary moment. The kind people make without thinking, especially when they expect to be gone only a short while. She walked out believing she would be back soon. That detail would sit quietly at the center of the case, waiting to be understood. When investigators documented the bedroom later, one detail stood out immediately. Shara's phone wasn't missing. It was right there, plugged in, set beside the bed as if placed with care. The screen showed nothing, no alerts, no missed calls, but the small charging light confirmed it was drawing power normally. Nearby, her laptop sat on the desk, closed and shut down, exactly where she usually kept it. At first, this didn't make sense to police. A young woman goes out and vanishes, yet her phone never leaves the house. That gap demanded an explanation, and it came from someone who knew her patterns well. During follow-up questioning, her older brother, Daryl, talked about something investigators hadn't considered yet. He said this wasn't new behavior. If Shara was stepping out for somewhere close, just around the neighborhood, a short stop at a local shop or a mall she knew by heart, she sometimes left her phone behind. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nothing that felt like it required staying connected. Daryl mentioned something else too, almost in passing. She had lost her phone twice before while out. Both times were frustrating enough that she became more careful afterward. Leaving it at home, charging, felt safer to her. From a distance, the logic holds. Familiar area. Short errand. A device she didn't want to risk losing again. It fit with the routine of someone who had lived in the same place for years and trusted the surroundings. It sounds like one of those habits you don't think to explain, until suddenly it matters. But that decision erased options. Without the phone, there was nothing for police to pull from the air. No tower pings. No location history. No movement trail. No last call. The digital thread that usually follows a person everywhere simply stopped at the bedroom wall. In a quiet way, she vanished before she ever left the house. She changed clothes before going out. Dark jacket with a hood. Dark pants. White sneakers. Nothing flashy. She took a reusable water bottle and a small black wallet. Then, sometime around 1:30 in the afternoon, she stepped outside, locked the door, and headed toward Fairview Central Mall. No one paused to watch her leave. There was no reason to. Everything about it looked normal. That image, her walking away under an ordinary sky, would later take on weight it didn't have at the time. Hours passed. The light outside faded. Mark finished work and checked his phone the way he always did. There were no new messages from Shara. At first, it didn't alarm him. Delays happen. Lines form. Shoes take time. Still, evening came, and the silence stayed. He started calling. Each time the call connected. Each time no one answered. Just ringing. Again and again. It wasn't until he spoke to her family that the shape of the problem changed. Her phone hadn't been dead. It had been ringing in her bedroom the entire time. That's when it stops feeling like a delay and starts feeling like absence. By late night, well past 10 hours since she left, Fairview Central Mall was closed. The streets nearby were nearly empty. Whatever explanation worked earlier in the day no longer applied. This wasn't running late. This was silence with no edges. The family couldn't wait any longer. A missing person post went up on Facebook. One photo. Basic details. A quiet hope attached to it. Maybe someone had seen her. Maybe someone knew something small. Mark shared it immediately. He started contacting everyone he could think of. Friends. Old classmates. Anyone who might have crossed her path that day. As the night deepened, the story began to spread. A bride to be gone just days before her wedding. Shares multiplied. Comments followed, confused and worried, stacking faster than answers. By the next day, her name was everywhere online. December 11th should have been the final run-through at the church. A rehearsal slot reserved months in advance. Instead, the space sat unused. No footsteps. No voices practicing vows. Just an empty stretch of time where something important was supposed to happen, and didn't. Days passed and nothing surfaced. No sightings that held. No messages. No accidental discoveries. It was as if Shara had been lifted out of the ordinary flow of life and set somewhere unreachable. With no other option left, her family formally reported her missing. Once the paperwork landed on the desk at the Quezon City Police Department, it didn't sit there long. This wasn't treated like a routine disappearance. An adult woman, stable, engaged to be married, gone days before her wedding. No prior history of leaving without notice. No known conflicts that pointed toward a voluntary break. The context alone made the case sensitive. Within hours, QCPD assembled a dedicated task group, pulling in senior investigators and analysts. Their focus narrowed quickly. Rebuild her movements. Start from the door she walked out of, and follow every possible step. They went to the cameras. Every security system within roughly 3 miles of her home was pulled into the search. Private houses, small shops, fuel stations, traffic intersections, main roads, thousands of hours of footage. For 2 straight days and nights, officers watched screens, frame by frame, stopping and starting, matching shapes and clothing, arguing over pixels. Slowly, something began to form. Early afternoon on December 10th. Just after 1. A camera at the mouth of the alley near her house caught her clearly. Black jacket, dark pants, white sneakers that stood out even in low resolution, a bottle in one hand, a small wallet in the other. Exactly what her family said she took with her. Her walk looked unremarkable, not hurried, not cautious. She didn't scan behind her, didn't hesitate. Nothing in her posture suggested fear or awareness of anyone nearby. She moved the way people move when they expect to be home soon. That clip mattered more than it looked like it would. It confirmed this wasn't a staged departure. She hadn't packed. She hadn't prepared for distance. Everything about her appearance said short errand, familiar ground. When you see someone walking like that, it doesn't register as a moment you'll ever replay. Half an hour later, another camera picked her up near Atherton Street. Same clothes, same items, same direction. That corner wasn't random. It sat along the usual path out of the neighborhood, the one locals used without thinking. She was moving the way she always would. A little before 2 in the afternoon, footage near a gas station showed her again. No changes. Her pace looked steadier, more purposeful now. Past that point, she appeared near a fast food place, then close to a bus stop. Here, investigators noticed something subtle. She wasn't strolling anymore. It looked like she might be timing something, trying not to miss it. Each clip alone said very little. Together, they told a single story. A clear route. A continuous walk. No detours. No interruptions. Up until that point, Shara appeared focused, aware, and fully herself. Then she reached Commonwealth Avenue. The scale of that road changes everything. It's wide, loud, constantly moving. One of the busiest corridors in Quezon City. Thousands of people pass through it every day, blending into one another. For investigators, it's both essential and unforgiving. Patterns disappear there. After expanding the search radius, police located another camera feed from that area, still dated December 10th. The image quality dropped sharply. Distance and crowd density reduced faces to shapes. But one figure stood out. Similar height. Same dark jacket. Same white shoes catching the light. That person moved toward a bus stop crowded with commuters. In one brief, distant segment, blurred almost to abstraction, the figure appeared to step into a vehicle stopped at the roadside. That was all the camera could offer. No plate, no route marking, no clear vehicle type, just motion then absence. That's the moment where everything stops being solid. From there, the investigation split. That unclear boarding changed the direction of the case entirely. Detectives had to decide what they were looking for before they could continue looking at all. The first assumption was simple. If she boarded a public bus, her possible range expanded instantly. One ride could carry her far beyond the neighborhood, beyond familiar streets, into places with no cameras waiting for her. From that hazy frame on Commonwealth Avenue, the case stopped moving in straight lines and began branching outward into possibilities that no longer touched the ground she started from. From Commonwealth Avenue, the road opens outward in two opposite directions. One path carries traffic north, toward Bulacan Province. The other funnels vehicles south, straight into the density of downtown Manila. Either option would instantly stretch the investigation beyond the manageable. Different jurisdictions, different transit systems, different costs, both in time and resources. At a later press briefing, police acknowledged something they had tried to avoid saying out loud. The footage simply wasn't good enough. The camera was too far away, the resolution too poor. Officers could not confirm that the person stepping toward the vehicle was Shara. They also couldn't identify the vehicle itself, no license plate, no clear type, no route marking. What looked like a turning point dissolved into uncertainty. That admission mattered. It meant the image on Commonwealth Avenue could not be treated as fact. The bus theory stayed on the table, but only as a possibility. Nothing more solid than that. The investigation stalled in a wide open space where every direction looked promising and useless at the same time. Still, detectives tried. They cross-checked the time window and began reviewing public transport routes that passed through that stop during the afternoon. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it was overwhelming. Dozens of vehicles. Peak hour traffic. No onboard camera systems that could be accessed later. No centralized data trail to follow. Street cameras offered little help. Angles were wrong. Distances too great. Crowds blurred everything together. There was no clear moment of boarding. No clean exit shot. Nothing that could anchor the timeline to a specific vehicle. Eventually, the Commonwealth Avenue lead stopped giving anything back. It couldn't be pushed further. Once that happens, you can feel the case slow down, even if no one says it out loud. While police hit technical walls, Shara's family and Mark didn't wait. They moved on instinct, not procedure. The place she had mentioned that afternoon came back into focus. Fairview Central Mall. FCM. If she went anywhere, it should have been there. The hope was simple. A shopping center like that is covered in cameras. Entrances. Exits. Hallways. If Shara walked inside, there would be proof. If she didn't, that answer alone would change everything. When the family approached mall management and asked to review footage from that day, the response landed hard. The entrance and exit cameras were undergoing upgrades. Maintenance work. For December 10th, there was no stored video at all. Nothing. That absence cut a hole straight through the investigation. The one place that could have confirmed her destination had gone dark on the exact day it was needed. It meant no one could say for sure whether Shara ever entered the mall. A few staff members inside the center thought they might have seen someone who looked like her. Similar build. Similar clothing. Later, posts surfaced online claiming a woman matching her description had been spotted at another shopping area altogether. Different location. Same black jacket. Same white shoes. But each account came with the same problem. No photos. No exact times. No confirmation. Just memory layered over stress. Police logged the information but couldn't act on it. They widened the search again. Another possibility had to be addressed. That Shara, overwhelmed, might have gone back to her hometown to breathe, to step away quietly. Officers coordinated with local authorities in Romblon Province, where her family roots were. Relatives were checked. Familiar places visited. Questions asked carefully. Nothing turned up. Immigration records were pulled next. If she had left the country, there would be a trail. Tickets. Clearances. A record of departure. There was none. No sign she had exited through legal channels. By then, it felt like every official door had been opened and closed again. With no new technical leads, the tone outside the investigation began to shift. Online attention drifted. The focus moved away from locating Shara and toward assigning blame. Speculation filled the gaps that facts couldn't reach. Rumors multiplied. Theories spread without friction, boosted by algorithms that favored intensity over accuracy. The search quietly entered a new phase. Less about where she might be, and more about who people believed should answer for her disappearance. 2 days after the wedding date passed in silence, police made an announcement that shifted the gravity of the case. On December 16th, the Quezon City Police Department confirmed that Mark Reyes had been listed as a person of interest in the file. They were careful with their words. Repeated it, actually. This was not an accusation. Not a charge. Just procedure. In adult missing person cases, the partner is often examined closely. Mark had been the last person Shara contacted. He knew her routines, her circle, the small private rhythms of her life better than anyone else. That explanation held inside a police report. Outside of it, the phrase took on a different meaning. Online, person of interest collapsed into something darker. Suspicion hardened almost instantly. Mark's face appeared everywhere, paused and replayed, slowed down to fractions of a second. Every public appearance became material. His eyes, his hands, the way he stood when he spoke. Exhaustion looked like guilt to some. Confusion became calculation. Grief was reinterpreted as performance. One post fixated on the last message Shara sent him. She doesn't usually use capital letters, it claimed. Why were there capitals this time? Could the message have been typed by someone else? A small irregularity, possibly nothing at all, turned into a thread others began pulling at. Soon, the story expanded. Anonymous accounts claimed to know what really happened. They said the couple had argued, that tensions existed behind the scenes. The disappearance, they suggested, wasn't a mystery at all. It was a crime hidden in plain sight. None of it came with proof. It didn't need to. Once people decide on a story, they start fitting everything into it. Mark didn't withdraw. He didn't disappear from view. He did the opposite. He gave police full access to his life. Both phones were handed over. His own and Shara's, the one left charging in the bedroom. No delays. No conditions. He agreed to a long interrogation that stretched on for hours. Questions circled back again and again. About money. About disagreements. About the smallest routines across 10 years together. Nothing was skipped. No memory was considered too minor. Later, under camera lights that didn't soften anything, he spoke briefly. He said he wasn't afraid of being investigated. That every part of his life could be examined if it helped bring her back. He said he wasn't trying to protect himself. Only her. At the same time, attention began drifting in another direction. A different explanation started circulating, one that placed Shara at the center of her own disappearance. It gained traction after a sworn statement from one of her bridesmaids, Jackie Luo, surfaced online and spread quickly. The testimony changed how people looked at the smiling photos. According to Jackie, Shara had been carrying a financial burden she rarely talked about. The pressure wasn't abstract. It had a name. Her father, Jose Dewan. He was seriously ill and required ongoing medical treatment. Not a temporary situation. Not something that would resolve with time. The cost was constant. Heavy. Enough to wear down even stable households. Mark had previously told the public that company-provided health coverage would help manage those expenses. That it wouldn't become overwhelming. Jackie's statement painted a different picture. The insurance coverage under Shara's name had already reached its limit. The remaining treatments would no longer be covered. People forget how quiet financial stress can be, until it isn't. What had looked like a happy countdown to a wedding now carried another layer. Beneath the planning and smiles, there was pressure that hadn't made it into public view. And as that information spread, the story shifted again, away from certainty, deeper into complexity, where motives were guessed at and explanations multiplied faster than answers. The case was no longer just about where Shara had gone. It was about which version of her disappearance people were willing to believe. Money wasn't pressing in from just one direction. It came from everywhere at once. Medical bills that didn't stop. Wedding expenses that looked manageable until they were totaled. The dress. The reception. The rituals. The gifts expected on both sides. Each item small on its own, but together overwhelming. Add the mortgage on a home they hadn't even moved into yet. Daily living costs. Medication that couldn't be paused. None of it was abstract. It was all due now or soon. Placed together, those pressures sat heavy on someone already standing at the edge of a major life change. In that context, a comment Shara had made earlier began to feel different. She had told Mark she wanted to quit her job. Not angrily, not dramatically, just stated. Flat. It didn't sound like a passing complaint. It sounded like fatigue that had gone too far. Her mother later confirmed something similar. The day before Shara disappeared, she had spoken softly, struggling to form thoughts. She told her mother that thinking had become difficult. That sentence lingered longer than it should have. Slowly, a picture took shape in the public imagination. A woman buried under obligations, torn between family duty, marriage, and work. Looking for air. Maybe not planning to disappear, just needing space. And then needing more of it. That interpretation made certain choices easier to understand. Leaving without a phone. Carrying almost nothing. Maybe it started as a short walk meant to clear her head. And then momentum took over. Sometimes leaving doesn't feel like leaving at first. It feels like stepping aside. With nothing left to chase, the family turned to something outside procedure. They consulted a well-known psychic. Tarot cards. Quiet sessions. The psychic said Shara was alive. That she hadn't left Luzon. That she was somewhere north, maybe Pangasinan, maybe Baguio. According to that reading, Shara had left on her own, pushed past what she could bear. There was no evidence in it. Nothing police could use. But hope doesn't need proof to survive. Nearly 2 weeks had passed. The waiting wore everyone down. Sleep came in fragments. Conversations repeated themselves. With no new leads, the family raised the reward to roughly $2,500, hoping money might pull a memory loose from somewhere. December 29th, a Monday. Many believed the case was settling into silence. Then it moved. Not in Quezon City. Far from it. Nearly 125 miles north. That afternoon, Mark sat at home, straightening missing posters that had softened and curled from rain and sun. His phone buzzed sharply against the desk. The sound felt too loud in the quiet. An unfamiliar number filled the screen. The area code wasn't local. He waited, then answered. The voice on the other end broke immediately. Crying, uneven, and instantly familiar. It was Shara. She said she was using someone else's phone. A motorcycle taxi driver named Rodel. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. That call, after 19 days, changed everything. You can hear recognition before words make sense. Rodel was an ordinary man living in Sison, Pangasinan. That day, he had been riding along a bypass road on his way to work. A road meant for vehicles, not people. Quiet, sparse, easy to miss. And that's where Shara re-entered the story. On that road, there was very little to hold on to visually. Fields on both sides. Empty plots where nothing had been built. A stretch of pavement that didn't invite people to linger. It felt cut off, even in daylight. According to Rodel's later account, that was why the figure ahead of him stood out so sharply. A woman. Alone. Walking where people almost never walked. He slowed without fully understanding why. In that area, pedestrians were rare. A woman by herself was rarer still. It was Shara. Up close, her condition was hard to take in. The black clothes she wore were dulled with dust. Her white sneakers had lost their color completely, stained brown and gray from days of use. Her hair hung unevenly around her face. Her cheeks looked hollow. Her eyes didn't settle on anything for long, as if rest had been absent for far too many nights. She didn't look like someone traveling. She looked like someone who had run out of strength. As Rodel passed, she raised her hand suddenly and called out. The sound broke into sobs almost immediately. He stopped, pulled out one earphone. At first, he only understood that she was asking for help. He didn't recognize her. Not yet. On a road like that, you don't expect a story. You expect nothing at all. She spoke in fragments. She said she was from Quezon City. That she had gone out to buy wedding shoes. That she was supposed to be married. That her fiancé's name was Mark Reyes. That name landed differently. Rodel took out his phone and searched it. The screen filled instantly. Headlines. Photos. Missing notices shared thousands of times. A smiling woman in clean clothes. Bright eyes. Carefully styled hair. He looked back at the woman standing in front of him. The faces matched. Undeniably. The difference between them was time, and whatever she had endured inside it. There was no doubt after that, but there was also concern. She looked physically depleted. Shaking. Disoriented. This wasn't someone who could be pushed into explanations or long trips. Rodel made a decision quietly. He brought her home. His wife didn't ask many questions. She didn't need to. The state Shara was unexplained enough. She was given water, food, clean clothes, a place to sit without being watched. After she washed and rested briefly, her breathing slowed. Her hands steadied. Only then did Rodel offer his phone. Shara dialed Mark's number. When the call connected, 19 days collapsed into a single sound. Recognition didn't need confirmation. It was there immediately, underneath the crying, underneath the disbelief. Sometimes a voice answers before your mind catches up. Once the call was confirmed, everything moved fast. Word reached Quezon City Police. District 5 coordinated immediately. A group was assembled, officers, family members, Mark, and they headed north. The distance was long, nearly 125 miles. By the time they arrived in Sison, Night had already settled. Shara was waiting at the local police station. Safe. Seated. Smaller than anyone remembered. When Mark saw her, the noise that had surrounded the case for weeks, rumors, theories, suspicion fell away. What remained was physical reality. She had lost more than 20 pounds. Her face was sharp where it used to be soft. Her skin looked drained of color. She tried to stand. Couldn't. Her body folded back into the chair as if it had reached its limit. The first words she managed were apologies. For the wedding. For the worry. For the pain she believed she had caused. Mark didn't answer them directly. He held her and repeated the same thing, again and again, as if it were the only sentence that mattered anymore. The wedding didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. She was back. We don't care about any of that. That was the sentence that cut through everything else. Just after 1 in the morning on December 30th, the convoy left Pangasinan. Police vehicles in front. Family cars behind. Shara in the middle, quiet, wrapped in borrowed warmth, heading back to the place she had left almost 3 weeks earlier. By the time they reached Quezon City, the night had stretched thin. No one wanted explanations. No one wanted answers yet. They wanted her to sleep. To let her body stop bracing itself. Procedure didn't allow that immediately. Before anything else, doctors had to examine her. It was required. They needed to rule out physical violence, sexual assault, injuries that might not be visible at first glance. The exam was brief, careful, clinical. There were no external injuries. That brought relief and another kind of ache. Because what her body showed instead was exhaustion at a dangerous level. Severe dehydration. Advanced malnutrition. Vital signs well below safe ranges. Doctors identified severe ulcer damage in her stomach, the kind that comes from long periods without food, under constant stress. Shara told them she hadn't really eaten during those 19 days. Water when she could find it. Small offerings from strangers once in a while. Nothing solid. Her body had adapted in ways it shouldn't have had to. You can survive longer than you think, but your body remembers everything. When she was stable enough to speak, police began taking her statement. Slowly. Gently. What they expected was a timeline. What they received were fragments. The story didn't tighten as it went on. It loosened. Shara said that on December 10th, she did reach Fairview Central Mall. She looked for shoes. Didn't find any she liked. She decided not to go home empty-handed and chose to head farther, toward Evergatesco Shopping Center. To get there, she said she waved down a vehicle that looked like a shared van service. The kind without clear markings. Inside were the driver and 2 men she didn't know. After that, the memory breaks. She wasn't sure if she fell asleep or lost consciousness. The space between those 2 things felt the same to her. Time simply vanished. When awareness returned, she was no longer in the city. She was in Pangasinan, nearly 125 miles away. How she got there, she couldn't explain. The middle of the journey didn't exist in her mind. What came after was clearer and harder to listen to. I just walked, she said, over and over. No destination. No plan. Just movement. She walked early in the mornings when the air was cool and the roads were empty. During the day, she hid from the heat and from people. Under trees, near abandoned structures, beneath bridges. Stillness felt safer than being seen. She remembered buses passing with signs pointing toward Cubeo. To her, that meant home. She followed their direction when she could, believing that if she kept going long enough, Quezon City would eventually appear. It didn't. Without money. Without a phone. With a quiet nature that made asking for help feel impossible, she endured. Hunger became constant. Thirst dulled her thoughts. Each day narrowed her world further. Not everyone asks for help the moment they need it. By the time she reached that bypass road in Sison, her body had nothing left to give. Her legs failed her. Her will followed. That was when she raised her hand at the sound of a motorcycle. That was when Rodel stopped. In January of 2026, police formally declared the missing persons case closed. Not because everything had been explained, but because nothing criminal could be proven. There was no physical evidence of an attack. No verified data to support foul play. In their final briefing, the spokesperson said it plainly. If Shara later recovered memories that pointed to a crime, and if those details could be confirmed, the case could be revisited. Until then, they would respect the family's wishes. The investigation ended there. What remained were unanswered questions, and a woman who came back alive, carrying time she could not fully account for, but no longer alone. On paper, the file was stamped and shelved. The missing bride case reached its official ending there, in ink and signatures. Nothing more to pursue. Nothing that met the standard required to keep it open. But closure like that doesn't travel very far. Questions stayed behind, scattered quietly among the people who lived through it. In family conversations that paused too long. In investigators who knew where the record stopped, but not where the story did. And in the public, who had followed every turn and were left holding fragments that never quite locked together. What happened in those missing spaces remains unsettled. Not proven, not dismissed, just waiting. Whether there is still a mystery here doesn't depend on rumors or theories or speculation anymore. It depends on memory. Sometimes answers don't disappear, they just take their time coming back. That's all for tonight. All of the stories have been told, and you don't need to carry them any further than this moment. If you're listening before sleep, I hope you can let your thoughts slow down now. Take a breath, notice where you are, and remind yourself that this night is your own. Thank you for spending this time with me. Rest well.